Good morning, it's 7 o'clock. Welcome to Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
With Sophie and Wilf, good morning from both of us. Massive day for Keir Starmer.
The Prime Minister fights for his political life in a make-or-break speech this morning. He'll try and convince voters and his own MPs that he's the right person to lead the country.
The 20 British people trapped aboard the Hantavirus cruise ship land back in the UK. They now face 45 days of quarantine.
Donald Trump prepares for tough talks over Taiwan ahead of his visit when he lands in China this week, as Iran rejects his peace proposal.
We'll also be discussing calls to ban Quartz kitchen countertops to try and protect the people who make them from an incurable lung disease.
And in sport, Arsenal go 5 points clear at the top of the Premier League, despite an unbelievably stressful finish to a Premier League game yesterday.
Hello, thanks for being with us today. Keir Starmer is facing a moment of real peril. After a devastating set of election results, the Prime Minister will give a speech later this morning where he'll set out his answer to them. Now, speeches are often described as make or break, but this one really is. It could literally make or break his premiership. We'll bring it to you live.
His former deputy, Angela Rayner, unleashed a broadside yesterday, criticising him for blocking Andy Burnham's return to Westminster and calling on him to deliver real change for the country. Well, 2 years on from that thumping 174-seat majority, the knives are coming out. But if the Prime Minister's to go, someone senior has to make a first move. We'll be analysing the Prime Minister's prospects and the fallout of an extraordinary set of election results throughout the programme.
Well, let's first go to Rob Powell, shall we? Here's our first report.
Angela Rayner scaling an assault course this weekend. Amid talk of a leadership race, the Greater Manchester MP has stopped short of launching a challenge. But she has laid down an ultimatum and put pressure on the Prime Minister to allow a senior colleague back into the Westminster fray. In a statement, she said, "It is time to acknowledge that blocking Andy Burnham was a mistake. We must show we understand the scale of change the moment calls for. That means bringing our best players into Parliament. The Prime Minister must now meet the moment and set out the change our country needs." Sir Keir Starmer previously stopped the Manchester Mayor from returning to the Commons. Angela Rayner now says Labour may be facing its last chance after bruising election losses. It comes after MP Catherine West threatened her own leadership bid if senior colleagues didn't agree on a successor.
That level of inertia in the face of the election defeat that we saw on Thursday is a disgrace. Working people sent us a message on Thursday. We have to listen to that and we have to change. And we have to do it quickly.
She's called on the Cabinet to meet and come up with a plan, but ministers are refusing.
I think she's got this completely wrong. What I do recognise, however, is that Catherine, like lots of other colleagues and like lots of candidates who stood in the elections that we've just had, are really hurting this morning. And I feel that too. You know, Friday morning I felt absolutely sick to the bottom of my stomach about the scale of the defeat that we'd suffered. And we got a real kicking from the voters.
In Catherine West's North London constituency, there was some surprise among voters.
Had you heard that the local MP around here has said that she's going to challenge Keir Starmer possibly for the leadership?
I didn't know that. I didn't hear the news this morning yet.
I think it's an excellent idea.
She seems to be trying to trigger something wider, or someone else to put their hat in the ring.
Yes, let's hope she hits a bullseye.
Any of the other options, are they going to stand? Because obviously I don't think it'll end up being her. She's kind of a stalking horse. I think all of the other options are probably going to be really bad.
This is an area where Labour is losing votes to other parties. Its MP now attempting to flush out a new leader who can turn things around.
Catherine West is not exactly a household name, so it's very hard to see her directly unseating the Prime Minister. But this still matters because it's an indication of how desperate some in Labour now feel about the path ahead, and because of that, it could still trigger something bigger.
West has hinted she'd like to see Angela Rayner run, but with Andy Burnham not in the Commons and not able to stand, this could all benefit Health Secretary Wes Streeting the most. No surprise then that left-wing MPs are worried.
We need a proper, full democratic process, not some sort of palace coup or coronation rushed through in a matter of days. And I'm really concerned that what Catherine's proposed could be exploited by people on the right of the party who want to close down the contest and end up with a coronation.
Sir Keir Starmer will launch a fight back this week with a speech. Catherine West says she could launch a challenge after that, unless someone else moves sooner. His former deputy now also breathing down his neck, a Prime Minister at risk of being overcome by events. Rob Powell, Sky News in North London.
Let's bring in Lucy, who's in Downing Street for us. Lucy, good morning to you. I guess the Prime Minister is going to be pretty nervous. He must know how important this speech is going to be.
Yeah, good morning, Sophie and Wilf. I'm kind of kicking myself, if I'm honest, because I've used the phrase make or break before, but it is make or break. This is the Prime Minister's speech of his premiership that we will hear later this morning. I think the Labour Party is waking up pretty paralysed this morning. That's the best word for it. After those devastating election results that we saw, this was a weekend, at least in the Westminster bubble, that was eventful, dramatic. I don't think you can find the right adjective for it. So where we are this morning, well, more than 30 MPs have so far come out publicly saying Keir Starmer should either resign or set out a timetable for his departure. It's worth noting that those in the latter camp largely support the return of Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Greater Manchester. The problem for him, he's not an MP, so some want to see this whole thing paused so that he can get back to Westminster. That intervention from Angela Rayner last night, hugely significant, seen as a possible leadership contender herself, but it seems like she's saying to Keir Starmer this morning, Prime Minister, you have one last chance. And that's where we will hear from him today, the biggest speech that he has to give so far. What will we hear from him? Well, he's likely to say that I'm aware of the scale of the challenge that we face, that I am going to meet it. I'm not going to walk away. We need to go further than we said that we were going to in the general election of 2024. He'll talk about the need to do that on defence, on energy. He's expected to say that Britain needs to get closer to the European Union. Britain will be at the heart of Europe, he's expected to say. I think that will be interesting, to say the least, given that so many of their votes went to reform. You know, some people at least, who voted for Brexit. So how will that go down? Well, we will see later on. The key here is that the Prime Minister must meet the moment. For the majority of his MPs, they've chosen to stay silent over the weekend. This will be the moment that they make their decision.
Yeah, this is it, Lisa. You kind of underline how it make or break the speech really is. And honestly, I've kind of given up trying to predict what's going to happen, because I feel like it is impossible right now to tell. And we could almost have an accidental leadership contest. We could say some candidates bottling it at the last minute. I mean, it feels so difficult to work out where this week is going to go.
I've been struggling, in truth, over the weekend, trying to work out what I'll be saying this morning. You like in this job to be able to make a prediction, and it is really quite difficult to. I think it all comes back down to the point again that there is no clear successor to Keir Starmer at this point. I mean, make no mistake about it, there are a number of people who believe that they are the next Prime Minister, that they have the plan to be the next Prime Minister. But we have a number of camps in the Labour Party, no clear idea of who has the most support. So I come back to that point again. This is what is saving Keir Starmer at the moment. But over the past 48 hours, we have seen, I think, more anger, more frustration, more determination than ever before to replace him as leader. Certainly those who want to see him remain in place don't say that he will lead the party into the next general election. And so this really does come down to what happens over the next few hours. We could be in a place where Keir Starmer is replaced as leader. We could be in a place where he kind of limps on. But I think what's worth noting is that we've still got another batch of Mandelson files to come. This is a Prime Minister that is going to remain under great pressure. So he is waking up this morning, that's if he's had any sleep, in a position where he knows he has to do something really quite extraordinary.
Lucy, thanks so much for that. And we are in a place here on Sky News where we'll bring you that speech live when it happens. We'll continue to build up to it and bring you all the necessary reaction when it finishes. So make sure you stay with us here on Sky News for all that you need to know coming from Downing Street today.
Yeah, it's going to be one of those days. It's it feels like people are still making up their minds as well. Different camps trying to guess what others are doing, trying to kind of game it out. It's proper Game of Thrones stuff going on behind the scenes. I feel like that interview that Keir Starmer did with The Observer, actually, just a quick 12-minute interview where he said that he wants a 10-year term, in other words, he wants to fight the next election, is something that's gone down particularly badly with MPs. But we'll try and get a bit of a sense of that as well.
Peter Carr from the government at 7:15, Nadine Dorries from Reform at 8:15, so stay tuned throughout the morning with us.
Now, 20 British people who were trapped aboard the cruise ship hit by Hantavirus have now arrived back in the UK. They got back to Manchester last night and they were currently in an isolation unit on the Wirral Peninsula. So far, there have been 8 confirmed and suspected cases, with 3 people dying. Sadia, the Brits are now all off the ship. Is that the same for everyone or not?
Yes, the Brits are off the ship, but there are quite a number of passengers that remain on the MV Hondius after that evacuation yesterday, and that is because the rule was that unless your country's aircraft was already in position, you weren't allowed to step off the ship, and we know that some of these planes were a bit late. So today we're expecting a Dutch plane to take the remaining passengers whose countries couldn't sort out evacuation flights to Netherlands, and then I guess the Netherlands government is organising their onwards journey from there. And also later today, a flight taking the New Zealanders and the Australians, who, by the way, include a dual national who's also British, back to Australia. So those are the remaining passengers to go. And I think there are some questions around if things will be done differently for those passengers today than what we saw yesterday. After the emergence of some news last night and in the early hours of this morning, I'll just go through that with you. First of all, in a situation in France where one of the passengers on the French repatriation flight began to show symptoms. France has now put all 5 of their French passengers, those who returned home, under strict isolation. And the passenger that was showing symptoms has undergone a PCR test, and we expect the results of that to come later today. And then earlier this morning, we heard from the US government that they have a total of 17 passengers who, the last update, were still currently en route to the US. This is a State Department aircraft, and 2 passengers, we were told, were being transported in what is called biocontainment units. So perhaps because they were showing some symptoms, it was then confirmed that one of them was showing mild symptoms, and another one, and I don't know if these are the 2 that are in the biocontainment unit, but one of the passengers out of the 17 showing some mild symptoms, and another one has lightly tested positive for Hantavirus. I think these are really concerning bits of news that are coming out. We don't know what the lightly positive exactly means. We haven't been given any more details. And of course, with the French, in the case of the French passenger, we are awaiting those results. But I think that will lead to a lot of questions about whether this was the appropriate thing to do, to take these passengers off and send them to different parts of the world. Now, in the US case, they're on their way to a specialist pathogen treatment center in Nebraska, and they are due to receive care over there when they reach there. But there are no suggestions that they are going to be required to do any self-isolation. That itself is going to cause some concern, no doubt, for not just countries around the world, but here in Spain, and for the World Health Organization, who were the ones behind this decision.
Thank you very much, Sadia. Let's bring in Shingi, shall we? He's at the Arrow Park Hospital in the Wirral. Shingi, what's going on here in the UK?
Morning, Sophie. Well, yesterday you would have seen those pictures late last night of those 20 British nationals being brought here to Arrow Park Hospital on the Wirral to begin their 72 hours of self-isolation here. It's in a separate part of the hospital here, which is usually used as the staff quarters and separate, as I say, from the rest of the hospital. And the hospital has stressed that their normal operations will continue, that patients should continue to come as normal. In terms of what happens next, we know that if those patients are asymptomatic after their period of self-isolation here, they'll be sent home or to suitable addresses to further self-isolate for another 42 few days. If they show symptoms, and they'll be being checked over here, they'll be being looked at and monitored over the course of their time here. If they are showing symptoms, they'll be taken to the Royal Liverpool Hospital, which hosts the regional tropical and infectious diseases unit for this part of the country. But I also thought yesterday, as those pictures came through of that bus arriving here yesterday, that would remind some people of the beginning of the COVID outbreak, just in the sense that this is the same hospital, and those images of those staff wearing PPE on the bus, as well as the people getting off, those British nationals being hosted here, were also wearing that PPE. But the one thing that the WHO have stressed, and other public health officials have stressed, is that this is nowhere near as severe as that, in the sense that this is not as transmissible a disease as COVID. We also know that in terms of what comes next, those people here will continue to be monitored closely as well. And another thing to note is that the kind of dislocation that they might have been feeling when they got here. They were on a cruise that began on 1st April as a trip of a lifetime, but it now ends in self-isolation in this hospital here on the Wirral for those 20 British nationals.
Shingi, great stuff. Thanks so much for that. Now, President Trump is heading to Beijing this week for a crucial summit with China's President Xi Jinping. The trip was supposed to happen in March, but got pushed back because of the Iran war.
So on the agenda, the US-China trade war, Taiwan, and of course, what on earth is going on with the war in Iran as well. Sky's Asia correspondent Helen Smith is in Beijing for us. Helen, what are you expecting? How's it going to go?
Oh, just so much to talk about, Sophie. It's just over 48 hours until Donald Trump will be here in Beijing for what is being described as potentially quite historic summit between the leaders of the two world's biggest and most important superpowers. Now, look, it is not the first time these two men have met, far from it. It's not even the first time they've met within Trump's second term. But the stakes this time, they just feel really, really high. And I think the reason for that is just that heightened state of global volatility that we're currently living in due to the Iran war that Donald Trump started. And of course, that war really weakens his hand coming into this. And I think that means that in the round, what might come out of this summit, what it might yield, is just that little bit more important, not just to the two nations involved, but I think for the rest of the world as well. Now, look, I'm sure I'm going to be on your programme quite a lot this week, and we are going to talk about all sorts of things, trade and tariffs and soya beans and rare earths and AI chips, but we will get to all that this week. We've just, a couple of days ahead of Donald Trump being here, taken a step back and had a deep dive look at one of the issues, or I should say the issue, that matters the most to China in all this, and that issue is the issue of Taiwan, of course, the self-governing island that China sees as its own. And I just cannot emphasise enough how central this is to the Chinese. It is, as Xi Jinping says, the core of the core interests. It underwrites everything that they do and everything that they're working on. Remember, China always takes the long and strategic view of these things. And crucially, they see in Donald Trump one of the best opportunities they have ever had potentially to achieve so-called reunification by peaceful means. Because remember, look, in a dream scenario, the Chinese do not want to fight a war over this. They would far rather this be done peacefully. They see Trump as a good opportunity because they see him as this transactional president, a president who hasn't shown an enormous interest in Taiwan amidst all the other things he's focused on. He comes to China really weakened by his war in Iran. He's going to need to ask for China's help on that. And he's made no secret at all of the fact that he respects the idea of a superpower's backyard. So all of this is making Taiwan very, very nervous indeed. So we travelled to the island of Taiwan to really try and get under the skin of this issue, to just try and understand how vital they do see American support and potential American intervention to be. How do people feel about it? Do they trust Donald Trump? And how likely is any potential conflict over this? And look, I've reported from Taiwan many times now over my years in this position, and I can say that the anxiety there, it's tangible and it really is up. Just worth adding as well, in that report, an interview with the opposition leader, a woman called Zhang Liwen, and she's at focus of a lot of controversy at the moment because she herself has been here in Beijing just a matter of weeks ago, the first time in a decade a leader of her party has been here. Her critics say she is playing playing straight into China's hands, and that they will present that to Donald Trump as an example that reunification is inevitable. So look, please watch the full report on Sky News's YouTube page and throughout the day on Sky News. And remember as well, all of this, the Taiwan question, all of it comes down to great power competition, and we'll be seeing a lot of that this week.
Hello, Anne. Thank you very much indeed. Well, it's a huge day here in Westminster after those devastating election results that we saw across the United Kingdom for the Labour Party. Keir Starmer is under pressure. He's under real pressure, and he's got a speech at 10 where he's going to try and set out the answer to the question of why his MPs should back him and continue to back him as Prime Minister. Well, we can speak now to the Business and Trade Secretary, Peter Carl, who's here with us. What is going on? What's going on?
Well, what's going on is actually quite an understandable and also relatable issue. We got hammered last week. At every election, the electorate tap you on the shoulder and send you a message. Well, we've just had the rug pulled from underneath us. We're also very close. There's lots of relationships and friendships at the heart of the Labour Party, and we've just seen people we really care about and know are doing a great job and put their heart and soul into serving communities lose their seats. So these are moments of convulsion, of challenge that really that test us. So it's quite right that we have this sort of emotional moment in response to what is a really challenging period. So the question is about leadership. I would say that the leadership of a country is not just one person, it is about the governing party. So we need to see leadership in that context. All of us need to rise to the moment, and Keir does need to also set out a sharper, bolder direction going forward with more clarity.
So you say you need to set out a sharper and bolder direction. The briefing that we've had of the speech so far is that Keir Starmer will vow to put Britain at the heart of Europe while sticking to his red lines on free movement and single market membership. I mean, it feels a little bit like even when he's fighting for his political life, he can't say anything interesting.
No, I think actually that's the sort of the headlines going into it. Let's let Keir set his argument out. I believe this really passionately. We've not touched the sides of what we can achieve with the European Union.
So why doesn't he say something actually radical then?
Well, let's just wait and hear what Keir is going to say. But actually, we do need lots of radical rethinking about the way we approach all bits of governing the country. When we came in, we faced huge challenges. We were preparing and understood there'd be challenges, but what we saw when we got in was more challenging than we'd even expected. And I can say that as somebody who came in as a Secretary of State. But I think we dwelt too much in the challenge, and it created a lot of pessimism amongst the public, and it showed that we were too comfortable talking about the negatives rather than actually pointing away towards the positives. One of the key things we've got to do is get to a point where we can generate hope and optimism about the future, starting with young people and the fact that young people have had less opportunities as a result of Brexit than they had before. These are the sorts of things we can strain at the bit to give more opportunities for young people, both domestically here in the UK, economically, and in terms of their futures, as well as across the continent of Europe.
So you're saying there that you need to set out, I guess, more of a vision for the future. If that is the case, why was Keir Starmer's first instinct to kind of reach back 20 years and bring back in Gordon Brown and Harriet Harman? It's a bit like saying, I haven't got a vision, let's just try and find the last people who did.
Well, I think every time you face either a personal challenge in life or corporate challenge in the organisations you work in, going back to people who have lived it and been through it and have wisdom and experience, I think is a good thing.
Who is Keir Starmer? That's the question. Who is he? What is his vision?
I'll tell you this, Sophie. I've known Keir for a long time. I was with Keir campaigning in Hartlepool in opposition, where we lost a seat in opposition to Boris Johnson, an existential moment for his leadership in our party. He rose to that challenge. And I was part of the sort of team that spoke very candidly, very directly. And then also, I was prepared to go out and do the media afterwards to defend the change that would come, and the change did come. So I've been around this a few times now. Now we're in office, the stakes are higher. I accept that we've done a lot in office, and I'm not going to list it for you and put your viewers through the shopping list of achievements that I'm proud of.
Thank you. Others do, by the way. Our
country still faces very large challenges. Sometimes they are the challenges on a scale that actually haven't existed in our country in most of our lifetimes. So we need to now show that we don't just have policies that meet that we have a sense of urgency in how we will meet it, in getting growth into the economy. Growth is the only way that we can achieve social justice and equality in our country going forward and create the jobs for young people We must get a much closer set of relationships with the EU and strain and show it delivers for people. We must do a lot of other areas with a much more boldness, much more urgency, and be prepared to strain at the bit and show that we're throwing everything at it to make it a reality.
You said it's high stakes, and it is high stakes for Labour, because if you look at the election results, if you get it wrong, it means Nigel Farage is number 10, is what it means. Do you believe, hand on heart, that Keir Starmer can win back Wigan, Sunderland, Swansea? Do you believe that?
I do believe it is possible. I am not saying that it is easy, and I'm not saying it will happen. I'm saying it can. And this is a moment where Keir will start to show the direction and he is willing to meet the challenge and the scale of challenge. But I accept also the window of opportunity has narrowed as a result of the elections last week. So therefore, he has to set out a direction and a scale of boldness in the speech. But don't forget, we've got the King's speech coming, a legislative programme, a set of other announcements, and we've got to show it in actions and not just words.
So are you effectively saying that if Keir Starmer does that, if he shows the boldness that you want, he should fight the next election, but if he doesn't, then it's time for a change? Is that right?
I think Keir is saying that give him a look today.
What are you saying,
I'm saying that he now has the opportunity to set out a boldness, to show that he has the urgency, to show that he will do anything it takes to achieve the scale of achievement that people are saying that they need. That is all he's asking for at this moment in time.
Okay.
Politics is always about alternatives as well. People I know are looking, because I read the news as well and I see what people are saying, and they're mentioning other names. But right now we have a leader who has shown he can meet the moment in different periods of time, in different moments of challenge. Let's give him this moment to set out how he meets and will meet the challenges that we have right now.
Should Andy Burnham be allowed to come back to Westminster?
Well, I think the first thing to recognise is that the reason that Andy is not in Westminster is not because of Keir Starmer, it's because of the decision that Andy took to leave Westminster in the first place. He chose to go back to Manchester. He made a set of promises to the people of Manchester, one of which was recently where he said he would serve out his time there as mayor.
What's your answer,
So I think these sorts of promises are really important. What we mustn't do is make this all about one person and put all of our hopes and dreams into one person that can come and save. I think we can realise now that leadership is not about just one person, it is about us as a party.
Do you think that's what others are doing then? They're looking at Andy Burnham, I guess, and kind of like slightly idealistic, you know, king across the water sort of vibes. Is that what you're saying?
I would say, and I'll answer the question directly, that the Tory party is not learning the lessons of the Labour Party in opposition when we had Jeremy Corbyn and we moved towards the extremes. They're not learning the lessons and they're repeating it. We need to not repeat the lessons of the Tory party in government, where they went from leader to leader to leader, always thinking that just a change at the top would solve all of their problems. So I think most people would acknowledge that the move from David Cameron to Theresa May was not a positive one. From Theresa May to Boris Johnson to Liz Truss. They thought that just by having this cycle of new leaders that they would turn a corner.
You said you answered it directly, so should Andy Burnham be allowed to return to Westminster if he wants to?
I think Andy Burnham left Westminster to go to Manchester and he made a series of promises. I think promises matter.
So he should stay in Manchester?
I think promises matter in politics and he should see that promise through.
West Streeting, you obviously...
Are you just going to go through all of the names of the different people who've talked about at the minute?
West Streeting, you obviously, you know, you shared an office, you kind of... Is he going to run? What's going on? You probably know more than me.
Well, I'll tell you that, put it this way. Wes and I last weekend, we went out campaigning together in Ilford, and let me say, he achieved a stunning result with that whole team in Ilford, because actually they held, and I think they took a couple of seats, a couple of awards off the Tories as well. It shows what a great campaigner Wes is, but that whole team is in that area. After we campaigned, we went for dinner and we went and saw a movie together. Somebody who was planning to pull the plug and launch a leadership bid in a couple of days' time doesn't go to the cinema with a friend.
What did you go and see?
Devil Wears Prada.
Did you?
Yes.
And what... did you discuss the leadership at all then?
Wes and I talk about about the leadership of the country all the time. And I think people would be surprised. And also I realised, because Wes and I shared an office together for 9 years, we were so focused and we spent so much time talking about the leadership of the country. We almost never spoke about the individual.
You didn't ask him if he was going to run as leader? You must have done.
No,
where's the journalist in you? Come on.
No, where's the journalist? the friend is there.
You didn't ask him.
Wes and I care so much about the future of the country. We have a very shared view of public services in the modern world, about what Britain's potential is amongst our competitor countries. So we both care deeply about the opportunities that young people have. I care very, very deeply about economic growth in our country. These are the things we speak about, how we tackle these challenges.
And I guess
but also,
for him,
we were friends going to the cinema and we had a good laugh about other things as well.
He's weighing... I mean, you know, for all of you, I guess, you know, you've got big questions. You've outlined some of them in the interview. So, and I guess for someone like Wes Streeting, he's working out, is it fair to say, what the best measure of achieving those is, which might be for him.
Wes and I are very good friends, but I'm not going to fall into the trap of being his spokesperson. But what I can tell you is that he, like me, is focused on the success of this government. His primary mission in government is making sure the whole government is a success, and he is there for Keir when he needs him. Now, I'm not his spokesperson. That is the approach I take to politics. That is the approach where we have a shared vision and where our friendship and our sort of relationship in politics flows from, because we do share our approach to politics in moments like this.
Thank you very much indeed. We'll have to leave it to next time to get the Devil Wears Prada review.
It's good. It's good. It's fun.
Good to have you on the programme, Peter Carl, speaking to us there. Coming up, of course, we'll continue our coverage ahead of that speech by Keir Starmer. We'll also be talking about the latest on the war in Iran with our security and defence analyst, Michael Clark.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
People are directly protesting. The whole neighborhood has rallied around her. It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
Perfect. Let's bring you some breaking news.
Being a Sky News presenter. I began by asking,
thank you so much,
trusting us to tell her story.
The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access. Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget.
Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
Welcome back. President Trump has dismissed Iran's response to US proposals to end the war as totally unacceptable. Tehran had called for an immediate end to the war on all fronts. a halt to the US naval blockade and guarantees of no further attacks on Tehran. Well, let's speak to our defence and security analyst, Professor Michael Clark. Michael, good morning to you. Great to see you as always. We're seeing over the course of the last weekend, despite some very positive rhetoric at the start of last week, just how hard it is to put this particular genie back in the bottle?
Yes, of course. I mean, wars are easier to start than they are to finish. I mean, the joke in military planners is that when British and other European military planners ring up their counterparts at CENTCOM, Central Command, their American friends, people that they've known for a long time, they start the call with, "Are we at war or peace today?" And they all laugh. That's the point. We're flipping backwards and forwards. In reality, the United States has got to stay with this. I mean, President Trump can make these strong statements. It's totally unacceptable. And he thinks that is a bargaining point. But the Iranians are offering to, as it were, step down on the Strait of Hormuz. They want a ceasefire in Lebanon, and then they will talk about nuclear issues. And that will then take the whole thing back to before the bombing started on the 28th of February. So in a way, it puts America not just back to square one, but square one minus one, because they'd be in a worse position then than they were before the 28th of February. So the United States was never going to accept that, but they've got to keep talking. They can't just walk away from this, because both sides don't want a resumption of outright hostilities. But the Iranians are doing what they always do, what they think they do best, which is spin it out, create conditions. They're very skilled negotiators. And the idea that there can be a quick deal over a weekend in Islamabad is pointless.
I guess the small positive, as you alluded to, is that the proper hostilities haven't resumed. Realistically, though, when do you think when's the earliest the Strait could genuinely be reopened?
Well, the way it's being discussed, they won't be reopened quickly. I mean, they could be reopened in a day if both sides drop their blockade. But nobody's talking in those terms. They're talking about a 30-day process of stepping down their blockade so the Strait reopens gradually, and it'd be conditional on both sides observing whatever they've agreed to observe. So it won't be a quick process. And then there's 1,500 ships inside the Straits waiting to get out, and several hundred ships empty outside the Straits waiting to get back in order to load up and go out again. So it'll be a long time before the Straits start to function normally, and world trade, could return to something of the situation it was in before the 28th of February. It probably never will. The Straits will probably never go back to the free, open waterway that they were before.
In terms of the very positive rhetoric and the impetus that we suddenly got a week or so ago to find a deal, to what extent do you think that is driven by President Trump wanting to please or have something to offer President Xi? And will that go away again once his trip to the US has gone away? Or is there something more fundamental now that President Trump at least wants to get things done?
No, it's a really good point. I mean, he goes to China. He's there with Xi Jinping on Thursday and Friday this week. He certainly didn't want to go to this China summit, which has already been postponed once already. He didn't want to go to the China summit with a war hanging over him, but it looks as if he will. He wanted to get it all out of the way so that he could concentrate on other things. So he goes in that respect in a weakened position to this China summit, with this war still dragging on and causing him a lot of heartache at home, and also threatening the world economy with tipping into recession, and that really worries the Chinese. Now, he might try to put pressure on the Chinese to pressure the Iranians, but the Chinese are very wary of getting pulled into this thing. They've stood aside, they've let it happen, and they have this sense that, as Napoleon said, never disturb your opponent while he's making a mistake. And the Chinese think that the Americans are making a huge strategic error in the Middle East and are letting them do it. And so the Chinese they won't save their bacon in the Middle East, they certainly won't. But they are worried, I'm sure, that the continuation of this war will create a global recession, which will be pretty bad for them.
In the last week or so, I've seen more reporting, I'm fascinated by your take on this, that in the early part of the war in particular, Iran's retaliation, particularly on US assets in the region, were much more successful than we've been sort of led to believe. Do you hear that as well?
Yes, and the reports are based on the idea that the Iranians received quite a lot of good targeting information from the Russians. The Russians, particularly with drones, I mean, the Americans had not taken drones so seriously. They looked at ballistic missiles, and they had their systems, like the Patriot system, which can bring down ballistic missiles. But the Russians have learned how to use drones efficiently in the Ukraine war, and they transferred that skill to the Iranians, or let them into the secrets. And they also gave them very accurate satellite information. I mean, the Ukrainians have given the coordinates. I mean, Zelensky said, in all of these cases, we can prove, he said, that the Russians gave very accurate coordinates of American bases. And interestingly, the Iranian attack on Akrotiri, remember the base in Cyprus? It was said, oh, it put a bit of a hole in the runway. Well, it didn't. It actually hit the hangar in which the Americans stored one of their only 2 U-2 spy aircraft. And that was clearly, that wasn't an accident, that was clearly deliberate. They were going after the American U-2s that were based at the time at Akrotiri in Cyprus.
Wow, really, really interesting. As we kind of step back from it all and kind of consider what's likely to unfold in the more medium term, what chances do you put on hostilities escalating again? Or do you think that part of it, at least, has been put to bed?
No, we can't rule it out, Wilf. I mean, the general view over the last 2 or 3 weeks is that neither side wants to, because when they got to that situation on, what was it, the 6th, 7th of April, both sides had arrived at the point where the United States was going to launch a massive attack on the end of civilization. Those are the phrases that Donald Trump used. And the Iranians were going to attack all out across the region. And I think both of them frightened themselves into where they'd got to at that point. They were both frightened by what they were then prepared to do. And they've both backed off that since. But if this spins out of control, and there's a lot of miscalculation involved here. I mean, President Trump constantly miscalculates or misreads the situation. Some of his other people don't, but he does. And the Iranians are famous for overplaying their hand. They've done it for years. They always overplay their hand. So there's a not trivial chance that we'll go back to that situation of the April the 6th, April the 7th, and neither side will know how not to do it. They won't know how to get out of the situation. Both of them are desperate now to end this war. Neither of them knows how to do it.
Michael, as always, a pleasure. Thanks so much, Professor Michael Clark.
We're going to look now at women's mental health after giving birth and some pretty worrying new research showing the reality of postnatal depression, because this report actually shows that new mothers in deprived areas are twice as likely to take their own lives after giving birth. Well, joining us to discuss this now is Dr. Livia Martucci, who is the chair of the perinatal psychiatry at the Royal College of Psychiatrists. Thank you so much for being with us. Just talk us through the findings then. They look pretty stark.
Yes, indeed they are, Sarah. This is not a new finding. It's in recent years something that we have seen, that women living in deprived areas and in more deprived conditions are more likely to commit suicide in the first postnatal year compared to women in less deprived area. And as a whole, suicide is the leading cause of maternal death in the period going from the first 6 weeks after the birth of the baby to the end of the first postnatal year.
And do we know why that is? Is it because, you know, look, if you're living in a deprived area, if you've got a baby, you haven't got enough money, you haven't got perhaps the support around you, then, you know, life is genuinely harder.
Life is genuinely harder. First of all, postnatal depression is a common complication of pregnancy. It happens to more than 1 woman in 10, generally speaking, in the general population. So it's a very, very common disease. People who live in deprived areas, as you've said, often have less support. Perhaps they have more of a fragmented family system, less financial resources, and it's not uncommon that they might already have other illnesses and other complications in their lives, such as abusive relationships or sometimes coping with alcohol or drugs that can make their situation worse. And all of this also causes concerns about their ability to look after their baby. And while the presence of children's social care is there to help, it can feel very stressful and add to these people's anxiety in that situation.
And what can be done? What are we calling for today to try and help the situation?
Well, a lot of things can be done. The first thing that I think is very important that we are working on is to rectify as much as possible health inequalities. So we are doing a lot of work, either in partnership with specific cultural communities or religious communities, and also work in partnership with charities to reach this group, which is sometimes presenting with more barriers to receiving care, whether it's cultural or language, or simply isolation. And we are doing a lot of work to work together with primary care colleagues and help them learn how to recognize signals that somebody's mental state is getting worse and needs more help. And perinatal psychiatrists are usually at the forefront of this work because they, through training and experience, they have the ability to formulate a patient as a holistic picture, seeing the whole person, their biological needs, but also their psychological needs and their social needs, and put that together in a coherent narrative that can help understand what that person needs. And they have the skills to orchestrate a multidisciplinary team so that patient can be helped to make a strong care plan. But in order to do that, we have to be able to reach these mothers and or birthing people and help them work with us.
OK, thank you very much indeed. Great to have you on the programme today. If you have been affected by the story and you want to talk to somebody, remember, of course, you can call the Samaritans free on 116123 and also visit samaritans.org, always there.
Well, Jackie's joined us because after the break, we're going to be reviewing the sport, which is, the result was positive, but God, I'm still stressed even thinking about it.
Positive for Arsenal fans, we should say, not
Yes.
so positive for West Ham fans.
Was it the most controversial or consequential VAR decision ever? We're going to be looking at that because it did finish Arsenal 1, West Ham 0 at West Ham. It could have been so different. It impacted so many teams at the top and the other ends of the table. So we'll be having a look at the goals, the incident, the goal that wasn't allowed, and you can let us know what you think about that decision yesterday.
I'm Adam Parsons, Sky's Middle East correspondent. We've just entered Gaza. The vista out there is complete destruction. I'll always remember going into Gaza City during the war. All around us was destruction and the sounds of battle. What you see a lot of here are military machines, soldiers, devastation and destruction. What you see very little of are the locals, the Gazans, the people who used to live here, the ghosts of this town. I witnessed the scars of the October the 7th attacks, burnt out homes, bullet holes in walls and bloodstains on the floor.
People were murdered. You have the black flag, you have the yellow flag, people were kidnapped.
Inside this convoy, prisoners released by Israel in exchange for their hostages. The Israelis insist that many of these prisoners are terrorists, but here the Palestinians consider them a blend of freedom fighters and political prisoners. There were tears and there was defiance. This land has been farmed for hundreds of years, but now it's a scene of conflict. Israeli settlers have come to this area to seize land.
They've taken the land that I inherited from my father, and my father inherited from his father.
What would happen if you went over?
Oh, we'll be shot.
This is a place where the past is cherished, but the future is feared. These are the settlers in waiting, keen to start a new life, to annex Gaza for Israel.
The least we can do is just kick them out of our land.
Gaza, which is just 2 miles in that direction, is under attack again. Sky News, get the full story first.
A lot of local and national seats are up for grabs.
Waiting for the people's vote
on who will sit in them.
It's your chance to have a say
on who has a seat at the table.
Follow Sky News as we give you the best seats in the House.
From voting
to the results,
the analysis,
and what comes next.
Join us for Vote 26.
Get the full story fast on Sky News. I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict.
The world has been watching. Good to see you again. How are you?
Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back.
Historic day here today.
How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They'll be all out to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on.
I'm Yalda Hakim.
I mean, it was a huge weekend for the Premier League, at the top of the table and the bottom of the table. Jackie, what happened?
It was so nerve-wracking, that match, actually. Even, you know, if you're an Arsenal fan, it was nerve-wracking. If you're a West Ham fan, it was really nerve-wracking. If you're a Spurs fan, it was really nerve-wracking. I mean, the outcome of that match yesterday at West Ham Stadium, 1-0 to the Arsenal, has impacted both ends of the table. It meant that Forest were mathematically safe after that win, because they'd already got a point over the weekend. It meant that, you know, West Ham are really, really, really fighting for their lives. It meant that Spurs fans were cheering on Arsenal because that result also went in their favour, and they play Leeds tonight. So, I mean, they're just... And Arsenal, of course, fighting for their first title in 22 years. And the VAR decision is being described as the most important VAR decision ever made. I mean, really, really being talked up today by absolutely everyone. So we have a look at what happened. So first of all, Leandro Trossard put Arsenal ahead. It was a very nervous second half from Arsenal, but Odegaard went on, helped set up this goal. Arsenal are ahead, 83rd minute, and they're so good at defending. You just kind of thought, well, they're going to hang on now. You know, that's it. It's fine. But deep into stoppage time, Callum Wilson equalised. Well, he thought he'd equalised. So much grappling in the box, so much grappling, and the grapple that sort of decided it all was Pablo holding onto Raya's arm and neck. We can have a look at this. I mean, it's really hard to see, even from this. You can see, you know, the West Ham goalkeeper sort of rushes ahead in front of him. He's being pulled by the neck, by his arms being pulled down. What's a really good angle of it, actually, is the stills on the back pages of today's newspaper. So if we have a look at the Mail, for example, you can see quite clearly what's happening there. His arm's being pulled, his neck's being pulled, his shoulders being pulled. So I think most people agree it was a correct decision. However, the consistency across the season, you know, has it been there? No. You know, have people got away with this? Yes, often. And I think that's what really bothered West Ham, and they were really sort of quite classy in their response at the end of that match. The fact that they didn't kick off, you know, Jarrod Bowen said, it just isn't consistent. Nuno Espirito Santo said, it's just not consistent. What is a foul in that situation, or what is not a foul? And,
I mean, look, obviously the decision as an Arsenal fan went our way. I was just thinking, by the way, as Keir Starmer was in the side panel, there's probably the one bit of good news he got this weekend.
Yeah. As another
the juxtaposition of it. But the decision went the way of an Arsenal fan, but it was actually, as you step back, reminded me that VAR ruins everything.
I know, it kills the joy of the moment, right?
And goal line technology, and I feel a lot for West Ham fans in that moment. But
yeah, me too.
The whole game was an unbearably tense watch.
Yeah,
I think on both sides.
Yeah, Arsenal. It was very nervy from Arsenal. Do you know who is also really nervous in Scotland? Hearts, having led the way and look like, you know, they are going to get their first title in 66 years. It is so tight now because Celtic won the Old Firm derby convincingly yesterday. 3-1 it was in the end. This fella, Daisy Maida, scoring 2 goals in 3 minutes in the second half. Look how good that is. So 3-1. That leaves the situation in Scotland. Hearts top, 77 points. Celtic behind them, 76 points. 2 games to go. 1 week to go in that title race. They've each got a game midweek. So Hearts drop points to Motherwell. Motherwell have been brilliant all season. Celtic have got to play Motherwell next. Hearts play Falkirk, and then they play each other on the last day of the season. I mean, talk about
that. Brilliant.
Yeah, at the risk of angering a whole load of people, I just really hope Hearts do it.
But honestly, but what's so exciting is north of the border, south of the border, there's so much to play for still. Yeah. I mean, the run-ins...
Amazing title races, both of them. Amazing title races this season. You know, people coming up in the rearview mirror. I mean, Celtic thought they were dead and buried. And then Martin O'Neill comes in and just waves his magic wand and suddenly, ooh, we've got a chance of winning this again.
I don't know what we were meant to do next, just quickly, because we'll go from Old Firm. El Clasico yesterday.
Yes,
well.
Marcus Rashford scored in that. We haven't got the pictures of that, sadly, but Marcus Rashford scored the first goal in that. They won 2-0
and they're champions,
to beat Real Madrid, and Barcelona are champions. So where does he go next? He's still a Man United player, but is he going to stay there?
Kudos to him.
We need to talk about the greatest sporting achievement of the weekend, though, which is by our very own Jackie.
If you can count walking as a sporting achievement.
How far did you walk?
Thank you. 20k, raising money for a great charity called Future Dreams, who have set up a house for anyone who's diagnosed with breast cancer. It's free to use. And the thing is, when you go through a cancer diagnosis, you can feel really alone and really lost and really, you know, it shakes your world. And to have somewhere to go where you can get advice, you can get, you know, here's what bra to wear because you've had a mastectomy, all sorts of support that you never knew that you needed until you need it. So it was a great cause, raised loads of money. So thank you for everyone who supported me.
But you're very humble about this stuff, like saying, oh, it's not even a sport, but like walking that far. And also, it's an incredible message for people who might be having that cancer diagnosis, and they look at someone like you doing that. Amazing.
Who'd, you know, been through cancer and got like quite bad nerve endings in our feet. Some people couldn't feel their feet anymore because of chemotherapy. Kind of does that to you. So I was quite worried about my feet. I know it sounds a really stupid thing to worry about, but they were all taped up.
And in bright and early this morning, as if nothing has happened.
I don't know about the bright.
Credit to that. Yeah. That does it for this hour. We'll be right back after this short break with ongoing build-up to the PM's speech.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist...
Hi, darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
...is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more.
Well, let's kick off
and make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs?
He's coming out! What more do you need?
Good morning. It's 8 o'clock. Welcome to Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
We're Sophy and Wilfred. Very good morning from me as well. Lots ahead.
The Prime Minister fights for his political life. In a make-or-break speech this morning, he'll try and convince voters and his own MPs he's the right person to lead the country.
The 20 British holidaymakers trapped aboard the Hantavirus cruise ship land back in the UK. They now face 45 days of quarantine.
Donald Trump prepares for tough talks over Taiwan ahead of his visit when he lands in China this week as Iran rejects his peace proposal.
Also today, calls for Quartz kitchen countertops to be banned to protect the people who make them from an incurable lung disease.
And in sports, Arsenal go 5 points clear out the top of the Premier League despite a late scare against West Ham.
A very good morning to you. Sir Keir Starmer is facing a moment of real peril today after a devastating set of local election results late last week. The Prime Minister will give a speech at 10 a.m. this morning where he'll set out his response. Speeches are often described as make or break. This one really is. It could be something that triggers his downfall or allows him some significant breathing room.
So we'll bring that speech to you live. And of course, all eyes will be on how his potential leadership rivals react. His former deputy, Angela Rayner, unleashed a broadside yesterday, criticising him for blocking Andy Burnham's Westminster return and calling on Keir Starmer to deliver real change for the country. I mean, it is slightly mad to think it was only 2 years ago that Keir Starmer won that 174-seat majority. But, of course, if he's going to go, someone has got to make the first move. We're going to be analysing the Prime Minister's prospects and the fallout of an extraordinary set of election results throughout the programme.
Our political correspondent Rob Powell has our first report.
Angela Rayner scaling an assault course this weekend. Amid talk of a leadership race, the Greater Manchester MP has stopped short of launching a challenge. But she has laid down an ultimatum and put pressure on the Prime Minister to allow a senior colleague back into the Westminster fray. In a statement, she said, "It is time to acknowledge that blocking Andy Burnham was a mistake. We must show we understand the scale of change the moment calls for. That means bringing our best players into Parliament. The Prime Minister must now meet the moment and set out the change our country needs." Sir Keir Starmer previously stopped the Manchester Mayor from returning to the Commons. Angela Rayner now says Labour may be facing its last chance after bruising election losses. It comes after MP Catherine West threatened her own leadership bid if senior colleagues didn't agree on a successor.
That level of inertia in the face of the election defeat that we saw on Thursday is a disgrace. Working people sent us a message on Thursday. We have to listen to that and we have to change. And we have to do it quickly.
She's called on the Cabinet to meet and come up with a plan, but ministers are refusing.
I think she's got this completely wrong. What I do recognise, however, is that Catherine, like lots of other colleagues and like lots of candidates who stood in the elections that we've just had, are really hurting this morning. And I feel that too. You know, Friday morning I felt absolutely sick to the bottom of my stomach about the scale of the defeat that we'd suffered. And we got a real kicking from the voters.
In Catherine West's North London constituency, there was some surprise among voters.
Had you heard that the local MP around here has said that she's going to challenge Keir Starmer possibly for the leadership?
I didn't know that. I didn't hear the news this morning yet.
I think it's an excellent idea.
She seems to be trying to trigger something wider, or someone else to put their hat in the ring.
Yes, let's hope she hits a bullseye.
Any of the other options that they're going to stand, because obviously I don't think it'll end up being her, she's kind of a stalking horse. I think all of the other options are probably going to be really bad.
This is an area where Labour is losing votes to other parties. Its MP now attempting to flush out a new leader who can turn things around.
Catherine West is not exactly a household name, so it's very hard to see her directly unseating the Prime Minister. But this still matters because it's an indication of how desperate some in Labour now feel about the path ahead, and because of that, it could still trigger something bigger.
West has hinted she'd like to see Angela Rayner run, but with Andy Burnham not in the Commons and not able to stand, this could all benefit Health Secretary Wes Streeting the most. No surprise then that left-wing MPs are worried.
We need a proper, full democratic process, not some sort of palace coup or coronation rushed through in a matter of days. And I'm really concerned that what Catherine's proposed could be exploited by people on the right of the party who want to close down the contest and end up with a coronation.
Sir Keir Starmer will launch a fight back this week with a speech. Catherine West says she could launch a challenge after that, unless someone else moves sooner. His former deputy now also breathing down his neck, the Prime Minister at risk of being overcome by events. Rob Powell, Sky News in North London.
Look, Rob Powell, I think they're really outlining the jeopardy of the situation. Like, just a couple of moves could bring the whole House of Cards kind of falling down, and all eyes, of course, on Angela Rayner, on Andy Burnham as well. Interestingly, Peter Kyle put out this morning by number 10. So, in other words, they're kind of pitch rolling for Keir Starmer ahead of that big speech. Just listen to what he said about Andy Burnham, because he was pretty firm here.
Andy Burnham left Westminster to go to Manchester, and he made a series of promises. I think promises matter.
So he should stay in Manchester?
I think promises matter in politics, and he should see that promise through.
Let's bring in Lucy, who's in Downing Street for us. And Lucy, I mean, presumably the Prime Minister is really quite nervous this morning.
Nervous, for sure. I mean, this is a make-or-break moment, as Sophie was saying earlier, a phrase we often use a lot, but this is without a doubt the biggest and most important day of his time in number 10 so far. Interesting to hear what Peter Kyle was saying just there. Over the weekend, we have broadly seen the Cabinet rallying around him, very keen to send a message to Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, that he should stay where he is in Manchester and not make any jump for a leadership challenge. Of course, he isn't even an MP at the moment, so would have a number of hurdles to overcome before he is. The party is absolutely, no doubt, in a state of real paralysis this morning. Since those devastating election results on Friday, the party, the Westminster bubble over the weekend, has been a dramatic place to be watching a number of developments unfold. We heard about Catherine West in Rob's report. As it stands, more than 30 MPs have publicly said they want to see the Prime Minister either resign immediately or set out a timetable for his departure. We should note that the latter camp largely want to see the Mayor of Greater Manchester find a path back to Westminster. Angela Rayner's intervention was significant last night. Somebody seen as a possible leadership contender. However, it seemed that she was saying to the Prime Minister, you have one last chance to prove to us that you are the right Prime Minister to take us forward. That takes us then to this morning, a day where Keir Starmer has to do something really quite extraordinary to convince his MPs that he is the one that can lead the party on. We will hear a number of things from the Prime Minister, talking about the need to be radical. Incremental change is no longer satisfactory, he is expected to say. Also talking about needing to put Britain in the heart of the European Union. Quite interesting, considering a lot of reform voters, we understand, would have voted for Brexit. So we'll see how that goes down. It's worth pointing out that the majority of Labour MPs have chosen to stay pretty silent over the weekend. For them, today is the point at which they will make their decision, and it all comes down to whether or not they decide to act.
And Lucy, so, the machinations are just moving all the time. I think it was quite interesting listening to Peter Kyle also talk about a cinema trip that he took over the weekend with Wes Streeting, who all eyes are on him. Let's just have a listen to what Peter Kyle had to say about what he was up to over the weekend.
After we campaigned, we went for dinner and we went and saw a movie together. Somebody who was planning to pull the plug and launch a leadership bid in a couple of days' time doesn't go to the cinema with a friend.
What did you go and see?
Devil Wears Prada.
Did you?
Yeah.
Do you believe him, Lucy? Do you think that actually he's not planning it?
Well, I think I've seen The Devil Wears Prada, and I think it was about 2.5 hours long. So there was plenty of other time over the weekend to be thinking about this. So I wouldn't say that that's not saying that there aren't a number of people planning leadership challenges to Keir Starmer. The truth is, we've been talking about this for weeks and months, haven't we? You know, this hasn't just come out of the blue over the weekend. So I don't think I believe that. However, what I would say is a problem, whether it's for Wes Streeting, whether it's for Andy Burnham, whether it's for Angela Rayner, none of them have the backing of the majority of MPs. There is still no clear successor to Keir Starmer. So that might be what ends up saving him again in this scenario. But while we've been having these conversations for a long time, this is without a doubt the most perilous moment yet for the Prime Minister that we've seen.
Lucy, I haven't seen it, but since you have, you can clarify this for me. Isn't it quite ironic that they went to see a film that's about, if I'm right, lots of sort of backstabbing with your leadership contender rivals?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed it. As you say, backstabbing is the word that came to my mind, actually. You know, talk about strategy, ambitious people, lots of egos in that film. So, yeah, maybe some parallels there. Yeah, interesting. And, of course, also there was a sequel, so there's something there as well, maybe. There's lots to it. And I'm hoping that there's another one. I'm hoping there's a third. What leadership challenge? Oh, no, movie, OK. Movie, movie.
Great stuff. Thanks very much for that. By the way, I thought the interview was really interesting with Peter Carr. Two big things. He, I think, was hinting that the EU reset stuff might go further than people expect. But I think also very interesting to say the Prime Minister has to show that he can drastically change people's perceptions of him. And this would be the big surprise of the speech. Does the Prime Minister say, I acknowledge that, give me 12 months to prove that, and if I don't prove it, I'll step down, or words to that effect, which I think was what Peter Carr was sort of getting at. I mean, if the Prime Minister went that far, you know, I do think it's a big, big shift, and the challengers might regret not going over the weekend, and we'll see, but we don't know. 10 a.m.
10 a.m.
is the speech.
And also, it is, you know, it's make or break. It really, I can't almost remember a time when so much was riding on one speech, so definitely worth sticking around to listen to what the Prime Minister has to say. And we'll also be speaking to Nadine Dorries, that's coming up shortly, to get the view from Reform after a very successful set of results for them last week. Now, 20 British people who were trapped aboard the cruise ship hit by Hantavirus have now arrived back in the UK. The passengers landed back in Manchester last night and are currently in an isolation unit on the Wirral Peninsula. So far, there have been 8 confirmed and suspected cases, and 3 people have lost their lives as well. And we are getting updates through about the condition of a French passenger, now said to be deteriorating as well. We can go to Shingi Marike, who's at Arrow Park Hospital on the Wirral. Shingi, what can you tell us about what's happening where you are?
Morning, Sophie. That's right, as you were saying, those 20 British nationals have been brought here to self-isolate. They've begun that period of 72 hours of self-isolation. Here they will be monitored by hospital staff. If they are asymptomatic, they'll be released to either their homes or other suitable addresses to continue to self-isolate for a further 42 days. If they show symptoms, they will be taken to the Royal Liverpool Hospital, which is the centre for infectious and tropical diseases in this part of the country. In terms of the setup here, we know that it's a building that's boarded off and it's further from the main hospital, usually used as staff quarters, so well away from the rest of the hospital. The staff here have said that anyone else looking to come for appointments still can. We also know that over the course of this period, the people here don't have many belongings. Most of them were left on that cruise ship for reasons related to infection, but they do have access to their phones and they have a small section of their belongings as well. And in terms of this hospital, why here? Well, it was used at the beginning of the COVID outbreak. There were British nationals repatriated from Wuhan in China, and the images were strikingly similar. You saw people on that bus there wearing PPE as well as the driver, but there is one key difference, which is that this virus is a lot less transmissible than COVID, and public health officials have been keen to stress that to help ease any concerns and any tension. And now, thinking about the people who are self-isolating here, they began a cruise on 1st April hoping to take in the wonders of the world, but instead what they're doing is self-isolating here in a hospital on the Wirral.
Shingi, great stuff. Thanks so much. President Trump is heading to Beijing this week for a crucial summit with China's President Xi Jinping. The trip was supposed to happen in March, got pushed back because of the war.
So on the agenda for the meeting, the US-China trade war, Taiwan, of course, the Iran war as well. Well,
Sky's Asia correspondent Hantavirus Smith is in Beijing. Hantavirus, so much on the agenda, particularly long-term discussion points. I guess the first topic, though, has got to be the Iran war and the extent to which China will not offer anything else to President Trump unless he draws the war to conclusion, or is, in fact, China sort of oddly benefiting in the short term from it?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, look, this summit is being described as potentially historic, and I think the reason for that is very much that context of the Iran war. Look, it's not as if these two leaders haven't met before. This isn't even the first time they've met within Donald Trump's second term, but it is the first time that they've met during the second term on one of their home turfs, if you like. And that broader context of the global volatility that we're now living in because of the Iran war, I mean, it truly weakens Donald Trump's hand coming here to China, coming to these negotiations. And crucially, China see it as a really golden opportunity, an opening, if you like, to really push for some of the things that they want. Now, look, I'm sure over the coming days, we are going to talk a lot on your programme. We're going to talk through all the minutiae. We're going to be talking trade and tariffs and investment and soybeans and AI chips and all sorts. But it's still over 48 hours until Trump is here. So we've been running a report this morning and through the day on Sky News that just takes a closer look at one of the issues that really is so central to what China cares about, that it will be really using this opportunity, this moment of arguable relative weakness from Trump's side to really push for. And that is the issue of Taiwan, the self-governing island that China sees as part of its territory, that it has sworn to retake by force if necessary. Now, look, ideally, China would really prefer not to fight a war over Taiwan. It doesn't want to. It would be costly and hugely damaging to its international standing. It would love a peaceful solution. And crucially, it sees in Donald Trump perhaps one of the best opportunities it has ever had to make progress on that. They see him as a transactional president. They see him as distracted. They see him as not really prioritising Taiwan, not a big issue for him, they think. He comes here weakened, as we've said. And look, he's made no secret of the fact that he respects strongman leaders like Xi Jinping and that he respects the idea of a superpower's backyard. So all of this the Chinese see as vitally important and almost exciting, I think. So, look, we travelled to the island of Taiwan to really try and get under the skin of how people there are feeling about it, how likely this might all be. And look, I've reported from this region for years now, and I've been to Taiwan many times, and the palpable anxiety there truly is notable, and it is growing. And you really get a sense there that people know that their fate is precarious, and they believe their fate is precarious while Donald Trump is in the White House. So look, it is one of so many things that will be discussed this week, but be in no doubt it is one of the issues that China will be really pushing for. You can see my full report on the Sky News YouTube page and throughout the day on Sky News as well. And just remember, Taiwan, trade, tariffs, all the other things they will talk about this week, they will all be seen via this important lens of superpower competition. That's what everything comes down to. That's what will matter this week.
Helen, thank you very much indeed. Helen Smith there reporting for us. Well, next we're going to go back to the politics, and we're going to talk to Reform UK's Nadine Dorries, former Conservative minister, since joined the party, of course, who joins us now. Thank you so much for being with us. What an extraordinary set of results for Reform, of course, over the election weekend. I did want to start, if I may, with Keir Starmer, because it feels like a pretty perilous week for the Prime Minister. Does it remind you at all of the last days of Boris Johnson?
Well, I think when Keir Starmer made the statement yesterday that he wanted to be in power for 10 more years and he wanted to lead the Labour Party into the next election, I think what I recognised was the moment at which he jumped the shark and at which Labour MPs will have said, no, that's it, it's time for him to go. So yes, I mean, I've been around the block a number of times on a number of leadership elections, They all have a similar feel. They all have a similar process. You know, the corridors in Westminster will be eerily quiet this morning. Labour MPs will be hiding in their offices. They'll be switching their phones off. And because the 4 contenders for that post for Keir Starmer, I think it's now unequivocal, he will be going. The question now that we're moving into is who's going to take his place. And there are 4 likely candidates, and all of them, all over the weekend, this morning, they will all right now be on the phone to every Labour MP trying to harness their support so that they can be the largest camp and the camp of MPs which moves against the Prime Minister and comes out as the leader, if you like, because at the moment, the Labour Party is completely divided into a number of camps. So they won't get anywhere. They'll never remove Keir Starmer if that's how they continue. And the 4 leaders know that, so they will be desperately attempting to harness the support of MPs today.
Peter Carl just told me a few moments ago that Wes Streeting can't possibly be wanting the job because he spent the weekend going to see The Devil Wears Prada with him. What do you reckon to that? Do you think that's
I think that's part of the process. That's literally part of it's like a Shakespearean play. That's part of what he's doing. It's kind of... That's Wes. He's very clever, and that's, you know, he's on the right of the Labour Party. He's a very clever guy. He's in a position of authority as Health Secretary, and that's part of the process. Look, I'm not moving. I'm not the person who's going to wield the knife. I'm not going to be the person who puts the knife in the Prime Minister's back. Look at me. I'm just out innocently at the cinema. It's all part of the sham and the process. But, you know, the one thing I have noticed, and you referred to Reform's election results last week, which were phenomenal. The one thing I will say about this is, and, you know, I have no pity for Labour MPs, but some of their supporters may do, is that Labour came to power 2 years ago on the back of a promise of growth, delivering economic growth. And that's what the country expected. And everything they have done since, whether it's workers' rights, national insurance contributions, I mean, I'm not going to go through the shopping list, but everything they've done since has had a paralysing effect on the economy. And it's 2 years now, and people have stopped listening. And they've turned to Reform because they know that Nigel Farage has been saying the same thing consistently for 30 years. And so they know they can trust Reform to deliver what they say they're going to deliver, because our message is not new, our message is consistent and has always been there.
On that, there was one policy that I wanted to ask you about. Reform has said that they would open migrant detention centres in areas that vote for the Green Party. Can you just talk me through that policy?
Yeah, I can't talk to you the policy because I'm not involved in policy development. What I will tell you is that it was bizarre how the left of politics came forward and said, why would you punish people in that way? Themselves framing the narrative that it was a punishment for residents to have migrants, people arriving in this country on boats, living in their constituencies. And as the hypocrisy of their response to that, I thought was quite telling.
But I just want to... I
have no problem. I have no issue with that policy, Sophie.
I guess my question on that is, you know, as you know, if you're in a green area, that doesn't mean everyone voted for Green. What would you say to, you know, I don't know, a family with kids in Lewisham? What would you say to a family with kids in Lewisham who voted Reform, and now they're hearing that your policy is now to put a migrant camp next to them?
The point of the policy was, A, to flush out the left, who, in their own words, said that anywhere where people have migrants arriving illegally into the country, living in their constituency, in hotels in their area, is a punishment to those people. So they said that first and foremost. But Sophie, if we don't put deterrents in place, if we don't, not for people to vote Green, but for people to cross the channel as we enter the summer, when the numbers will increase hugely, as we know, as the data shows. If we don't put deterrents in place, those numbers will continue to increase. And the Green Party's policy, let's just be clear about this, the Green Party policy is to have completely open borders. It's always been their policy, so that anybody who wants to come to this country can do. There'll be no more illegal migration under
Just to
Green.
go back to this,
It will
just
all
to go back to this, because I think, you know, and look, I'll talk to the Green Party about their own policies on this. I understand the politics of why you want to do it, to, like, you know, as you would say, to hold up a mirror to the Green Party. But this is people's real lives we're talking about. What would you say to that family? You know, the family with kids who voted Reform and they, you know, find out that, yes, you can trust Reform to stick to their promises, and one of their promises is that they might get a migrant camp next to them.
That family that voted Reform will continue to vote Reform, because that family will know that the only party which is going to stop the boats crossing the Channel, the only leader...
The only party that is going to put a migrant camp potentially next to their house is also Reform.
Sorry, Sophie?
The only party that his policy is also potentially to put a migrant camp next to their house is also Reform.
So, Sophie, we will see what happens moving forward. But what I would say is this, that it was absolutely startling, the narrative of the left, who suddenly admitted that migrant camps were punishments to those people who lived in those areas where they were already established. You know, what is a hotel, Sophie, which has been taken over, which is housing migrants? It is a migrant camp. It's just in a different form. It's just a different form of words. When you take over entire hotels and put migrants in them, that's exactly what it is.
OK, great to talk to you. As always, Nadine Dorries speaking to us there this morning from Reform UK.
Lots more still to come here on Mornings. After the break, we'll be talking more about the fallout and the implications of the results of last week's local election with Luke Trill, the pollster from More in Common.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
People are directly protesting.
The whole neighbourhood has rallied around her. It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
Perfect.
Let's bring you some breaking news. Being a Sky News presenter. I began by asking...
Thank you so much.
...trusting us to tell her story. The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access. Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
Hello, thanks for staying with us. We're talking Quartz next. These are the kind of luxury-style kitchen worktops many of you may have got at home. But there's a spotlight on them because of the number of workers dying from an incurable lung disease that people are saying could be the new asbestos.
So stonemasons are being diagnosed with a disease called silicosis after working with Quartz kitchen countertops. The manufacturer of engineered stone is banned in Australia over health concerns, and there are now growing calls for a ban here. Sky's Katie Barnfield has more. A warning, this report does contain references to suicide.
Why are kitchen worktops killing people?
They didn't hold back, they literally told me that it could potentially kill you. And it's just, well, what's going on?
It just beats you down and beats you down every time you go back to the specialist. Hey, guess what? The news is worse. By the way, there's no treatment.
You might have Quartz worktops like these in your own kitchen, but did you know they're causing a deadly disease that's taking the lives of young workers?
I'm absolutely sure there are people who have silicosis who are unaware that they have it walking around the UK at the moment.
So is this the new asbestos, and how do we stop it?
The UK needs to ban this product. It's like, sorry.
We don't get a grip of this condition, we'll see another national scandal like we saw in asbestos.
Well, Katie joins us now. I mean, what exactly are these countertops? What percentage of homes across the country contain the problem type of countertop?
We don't know the exact percentage, but there are absolutely thousands. I mean, these have massively grown in popularity over the past sort of 10 years or so. They're now one of the most popular, if not the most popular a type of worktop in the UK. It is worth just saying, if anyone's watching this at home and has a Quartz worktop installed, it's not dangerous once it's in your kitchen. The problem is the manufacturing process, the cutting process. Releases, because of the way they're made, releases really high levels of this breathable silica, and it is that's causing this condition, particularly in younger tradesmen. It's accelerating so fast in some cases that we're seeing people in their 20s, 30s and 40s getting really, really sick, and in many cases dying. In fact, the consultant we talked to for this report said the youngest tradesman that she is treating is just 23 with this, so it's a huge concern.
I mean, they're everywhere, these worktops as well, and I think it's interesting to see what's happening elsewhere because there is a bit of a move against them in other countries.
Yes, there is. Australia became the first country in the world to ban engineered stone entirely in 2024. We actually spoke to one of the workers for our report who'd campaigned for that, who has silicosis. He was only given 8 years to live in 2018, so he is now very much on borrowed time. He is absolutely adamant, as many other people are, that the only way to solve this is a ban. It does not appear that that's on the table for the UK at the moment. We've actually had a statement, a big announcement really, from the Health and Safety Executive, who are the kind of workplace safety regulator. This morning they say they're bringing in new guidance to mandate wet cutting for these worktops. They're going to be doing an inspection programme of 1,000 worktop fabricators over the next year in the UK. They say this is the most effective and proportionate way to protect workers, but of course that does stop short of a full ban. Whether that's going to satisfy people who are being affected by this, we'll see.
Really striking stuff, and the full report, full video is available online on the Sky.
It is. It's available on the Sky News app, and there is a full-length documentary available on the Sky News YouTube channel.
Great stuff, Katie, thank you. Do get in touch with us about that story, by the way. Email us mornings@sky.uk.
Right, let's get a bit more, shall we, on the election fallout and what a fallout it's been. Joining us now is the pollster and Executive Director of More in Common, Luke Trill. Luke, great to have you on as always. Always good to get your analysis. What are your kind of big picture thoughts? We've had a couple of days, I guess, to let the results sink in.
Well, I think at a top level, we have seen the death of the two-party system in Britain. Voters have fragmented in all sorts of different directions. And I think if you look at the 2024 general election, there are a few of us who thought, well, you know, maybe Labour's low vote share and people going to different parties was because the election was a foregone conclusion. This is an aberration. It will return Instead, the opposite has happened, right? We are in an era now of 7-party politics, if you include the nationalist parties in Scotland and Wales. And just looking at the scale of that fragmentation, I find it really difficult to see how, in the short term at least, you're going to put that Humpty Dumpty back together again.
Can I just push back on that death of two-party politics type argument? Because surely that is not established until we've seen a similar vote split in a general election. These are, and everybody knows going into them, local elections only.
And yet, if you look at the last general election, Labour got 1/3 of the vote, the Conservatives got 1/4 of the vote. So we've already seen a general election, the two main parties falling right back. And this seems to be a continuation of that trend. And when for the second year in a row in local elections, you have in the national equivalent vote a party which isn't the Conservatives or Labour topping the poll, you can see a continuation of a trend. So there's a temptation, I think, to dismiss this as sort of typical midterm blues. People always rebel against the main parties. The difference is they normally go from the government to the opposition. In these elections, what people have done is said, no, we don't want either of you. We're going to new contenders. And that sense of sort of being willing to roll the dice on something new entirely.
And I guess also important to say it's not just local elections, there's also the parliamentary elections in Scotland and Wales that we saw as well. I guess my question now is, you've got Keir Starmer's speech, right, and so much riding on that. And there's this whole beauty parade of different candidates kind of going on. Andy Burnham, people are talking about Angela Rayner, they're talking about West Streeting. What does the polling say on the potential alternatives to Keir Starmer? Is there someone who could actually turn things around for Labour?
I think it's fair to say that the problems go deeper than any one person. I think Keir Starmer, as we've discussed before, has become a particular lightning rod for public discontent. If you look at the contenders, Andy Burnham is popular. In fact, he's one of few politicians to have a net positive approval rating, which is quite something in our era when people are disappointed with all politicians. In direct head-to-heads, Burnham comes out on top of Starmer, so does Wes Streeting. Angela Rayner, though, trails a little bit, and she hasn't, in the public's eyes, recovered from her resignation over her tax affairs. So, you know, there are people who could do better, but I think you're not going to know much more about that until they start making arguments. What I am very sceptical about is the idea that one speech can start to turn things round for the Prime Minister. You know, in Westminster, again, we tend to build up these speeches. They actually tend to make very little difference. And until people start feeling that change, I think it's going to be hard for anyone to get a hearing.
Luke, on the topic of which way, and I know it's more complicated than simple left v right, which way the policy should go from here, whoever is the leader, what's your analysis of who Labour bled votes to the most last week?
So if you look sort of across the map, it is very definitely the case that they bled votes both left and right, and there isn't an easy pivot that Labour can make. In some of their heartlands in places like inner London, but also in Manchester, there was a lot of switching to the left. But if you look at some of those councils in the north of England, it is hard to look at the scale of the results and to say that there wasn't left-right switching from Labour to Reform directly. So I think Labour has to come up with an offer which can bring back disgruntled progressives in places like London, but also reach out into the north of England, the Red Wall. And I actually think that Angela Rayner's statement that she put out with that focus on the cost of living is probably the issue which unites both of those wings. When we speak to people in focus groups, whether they're going left, whether they're going right, one of the biggest drivers is that sense that life is too much of a struggle, the economy doesn't work for them. This cost of living crisis feels like it's never going to end. So, you know, if I were to advise the Prime Minister, it would be continuing a sort of laser-like focus on bringing down costs.
Luke Trill, great to see you as always. Thanks so much for joining us. We're going to return now to President Trump's upcoming trip to Beijing. Luke de Pulford, Executive Director of the Inter-Parliamentary Alliance on China, joins us now to discuss that. A very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
Morning.
Do you think the war will be top of the agenda, or the other topics that they've been planning to talk about for many years, even decades, will top the agenda?
Well, certainly the conflict in Iran is going to be on the agenda, but I don't think it's going to be the top issue, certainly not for Beijing. And it's very unlikely that Donald Trump is going to be able to get any concessions from Beijing over Iran. Bear in mind that it's pretty clear now that China is supporting the Iranians by supplying drone and surveillance equipment. So we know that they're involved. But there's no great incentive for them to make concessions to Donald Trump over Iran. So it's unlikely that's going to be a top-tier issue. I think the top-tier issues are going to be Taiwan, tariffs, and probably just general trading terms.
Just to dwell on the war for a moment, because clearly China is a net importer of fossil fuels and oil, specifically Iranian oil and other products from the Strait of Hormuz, in a way that the US isn't. So just how are they not feeling the pressure? I mean, I guess they prepared for this.
Well, they only import about 10% of their oil from the region, so it's not nearly as much as people would make out. But I think the broader picture is that they stand to gain by the US's loss, in a sense. So by having to sustain this conflict in Iran, the US is depleting its military resources. It's diverting its gaze away from China's periphery, all of these burgeoning conflicts around the West Philippine Sea or around Taiwan that they might otherwise be more engaged with. And it also increases the rest of the world's dependence on China for renewables, which they have a complete, almost total monopoly over. So there's less of an incentive for China to try to stop the conflict in Iran than there is for Trump.
What's your view on Taiwan and the extent to which the US might be willing to play ball with what President Xi wants?
Well, it's quite a worrying situation, certainly for the Taiwanese, who really can't call it one way or another. They don't know what President Trump is going to do, and they're obviously very worried about the fate of their island and their own self-determination. There are various rules in the United States laid down by legislation around the degree to which the US can support Taiwan, for example, through arms sales. And there's a real concern that maybe Trump is going to make some kind of concession in China over arms sales to Taiwan. Were that to happen, I think there would be a lot of noise in Congress, but there would be a lot of disquiet in Taiwan too. So let's see. But certainly I think that the Chinese are hoping to try to extract concessions around precisely those sorts of issues.
There's a lot of, I guess, pressure, as we've just discussed, in those areas. Does it increase the chance of a sort of reprieve when it comes to trade tariffs between the two countries, or lower the chance of that?
You mean if there were to be concessions made over Taiwan?
I mean, I guess a year or so ago we would have thought the only issue is trade tariffs. There's now issues that are above that.
Yeah, I think so. Well, I think all of these things are going to be in the mix. So there's also tech regulation and everything around that. I mean, China is suffering at the moment because of various export controls that have been slapped on them by the United States. They want to see movement on that. The United States is going to want to see, well, some movement on exports themselves. They want soybeans, beef, Boeing planes to be sold into China. So I think the important thing to emphasise is that both sides are wanting to move to a place of stability. They want to get beyond this tit-for-tat stuff. We're in a very different context to Trump's visit in 2017 with all the pageantry. We're now looking at a post-COVID, post-multiple conflict relationship, a great power relationship where stability, I think, both sides believe is in their interest. So they're going to be lobbying for that.
Just finally, is Jimmy Lai on the agenda for President Trump?
I certainly hope so, and not just Jimmy Lai, but also Pastor Ezra Jin and the many other people in prison in China, because only Trump really has the leverage to do anything about them. We hope that he raises Jimmy Lai, this British citizen who has been wrongfully imprisoned and sentenced effectively to a death sentence in prison. Trump can do something about that. We hope that it's on the agenda. Whether or not it will be remains to be seen.
Luke, great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Time now for a look at the weather.
Let's go.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News Weather.
Today looks mostly fine, but next week will be rather changeable. It'll turn cooler too, with a risk of some frosty nights. Southern Britain will be quite cloudy and breezy this morning, with patchy rain in the far southeast. Elsewhere, it'll be mainly dry with plenty of sunshine, but northern Scotland will turn wet and windy by lunchtime. The odd shower will also affect the southeast of Scotland. It'll be cooler than yesterday for southern Britain, a bit warmer for most others, but temperatures will be mainly below average.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News Weather.
Coming up, we have the sport with Jackie.
Was it the biggest VAR decision ever made? Was it the most consequential? Season-defining moment, perhaps, for Arsenal and for West Ham and for other teams at the bottom of the table. We're looking at what happened yesterday at West Ham. That's given Arsenal a 1-0 lead and advantage in the title race.
I'm Adam Parsons, Sky's Middle East correspondent. I've just entered Gaza. The vista out there is complete destruction. I'll always remember going into Gaza City during the war. All around us was destruction and the sounds of battle. What you see a lot of here are military machines, soldiers, devastation and destruction. What you see very little of are the locals, the Gazans, the people who used to live here, the ghosts of this town. I witnessed the scars of the October the 7th attacks, burnt out homes, bullet holes in walls and bloodstains on the floor.
People were murdered. You have the black flag, you have the yellow flag, people were kidnapped.
Inside this convoy, prisoners released by Israel in exchange for their hostages. The Israelis insist that many of these prisoners are terrorists. But here, the Palestinians consider them a blend of freedom fighters and political prisoners. There were tears and there was defiance. This land has been farmed for hundreds of years, but now it's a scene of conflict. Israeli settlers have come to this area to seize land.
They've taken the land that I inherited from my father, and my father inherited from his father.
What would happen if you enter?
Oh, we'll be shot.
This is a place where the past is cherished, but the future is feared. These are the settlers in waiting, keen to start a new life, to annex Gaza for Israel.
The least we can do is just kick them out of our land.
Gaza, which is just 2 miles in that direction, is under attack again. Sky News, get the full story first.
A lot of local and national seats are up for grabs.
Waiting for the people's vote on who will sit in them.
It's your chance to have a say
on who has a seat at the table.
Follow Sky News as we give you the best seats in the House.
From voting
to the results,
the analysis
and what comes next.
Join us for Vote 26.
Get the full story fast on Sky News.
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching. Good to see you again. How are you? Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They'll be allowed to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
It was another massive weekend in the Premier League, both at the top and the bottom of the table, embodied by a game yesterday, which was unbearably stressful to watch.
Chaos in the box, very, very nervy performance, I would say, from Arsenal, having dominated in the first half and then making not great substitutions and then kind of losing their grip on that game and missing chances. But, you know, what happened at the end, I mean, the whole match was defined in the last few minutes, wasn't it? You know, with a very late Arsenal goal, which we can have a look at now, followed by absolute chaos and wrestling in the box. So I think Arsenal thought, OK, we're going to walk away with 3 points here, when Leandro Trossard, after Odegaard had gone on to set him up, got this 83rd minute goal, and everyone thought, Arsenal, great defence, there's no way they're going to let it slip from here. There's not long to go. But with seconds to go, this happened. Callum Wilson thought he'd equalise, got a precious point for West Ham. There was absolute grappling, wrestling in the box, fouls all over the place. But the one that really counted against West Ham was this on David Raya, tugged round the neck, pulled on the arm by Pablo. And goalkeepers are the most protected species in this situation, I guess. So
the goal was disallowed. It was a 4-minute, 10 seconds VAR decision. It was not quick. And you've got to say, if it's not clear and obvious and it's taking you 4 minutes, 10 seconds to decide, as a West Ham fan, you can feel pretty aggrieved. That was the back page of the Mail, which I think showed really clearly what actually happened, because it's really hard to see from the moving pictures, but on the still you can see it. He's like right around his neck, pulling his arm, couldn't make the save the way he perhaps wanted to.
But you used the word in the way the most consequential VAR, but not controversial? Or was it controversial?
I mean, both, but I think a lot of people just think, yeah, that was a foul, and yes, it should have been disallowed. The problem West Ham had with it, Nuno afterwards and Jared Bowen in their post-match interviews, which were really controlled and measured, was, you know, this isn't... It's not the same for every single match. What, you know, where is the continuity here? You know, if you're not allowing that goal, then why didn't you allow this one or the other one? You know, why are you getting away with it sometimes and not getting away with it other times? And I think that's what really bothers people, that is... You know, it's just not the same from week to week, from official
And it's also just a wider point about VAR, because I agree, like, I think it was a foul, you know, you can see it, right?
Killer of joy, though, isn't it, VAR?
But it's a killer of joy. I think that's it. It's almost like letting some guy from accounts, like, take control of your biggest passion. I mean, I watch a lot of, you know, non-league football live, a lot of, you know, a support a team who've been in the Championship, and in these leagues, you don't have VAR, so you don't have that, like, can I celebrate this goal? You can just kind of go for it, and there is a freedom in that.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. I mean,
don't let's criticise people with accountancy degrees. But I mean, I completely agree with. No, but I've got other very boring financial qualifications. But
they're right in practice, the accountants. But I'm just saying you shouldn't be in charge of football.
I think VAR is appalling. We've discussed this many times. I think whilst it's in place this season, I'm dreaming that they'll abolish it one day. It was a foul. But, God, if you're a West Ham fan, in the same way as an Arsenal fan, I was like, oh, my God, what an unbelievable let-off is how I felt. Yeah. As a West Ham fan, you're going to feel, oh, how unbelievably unfortunate. And it was so stressful.
And, very stressful for both sets. But, you know, big impact, top and bottom of the table. You know, for Arsenal, is that the moment? Is that the defining moment where you go, OK, it's theirs now, the league title is theirs? Is that the bit of luck, in a way, that you always need if you're going to win something? You can't just be about performances. You need something to go your way along the line. And for West Ham, is that the moment where, you know, their fate is sealed at the bottom? Spurs fans, you know, supporting Arsenal yesterday, because that was a great, great win for Spurs, going to their match against Leeds tonight.
But it's not over.
Something. It isn't
it's not over both ends of the table.
No, it isn't. You know,
but the most dynamic where it's not over is up north.
Yeah. If you were nervous watching that, if you were a Hearts fan, I think you're literally shredded nerves this morning, no fingernails, over what happened at the weekend. So yesterday, it was Celtic Rangers, the Old Firm derby. Celtic won 3-1 comfortably to get their 3 points. A large part to do with this guy, Daza Maeda, who got 2 goals in 3 second-half minutes. And look at that, it's absolute worldie. Fantastic, fantastic goal. So Hearts dropped points at the weekend to Motherwell, who have been great all season. So we have this scenario with a week to go in this title chase. Hearts are at the top on 77 points. Celtic have come up in the rearview mirror on 76 points. 2 games ago, Celtic have got Motherwell away. That is not a given that they will get maximum points from that. Hearts have got Falkirk, and then they play each other on the very last day of the season. And it, you know, it's in their hands, Hearts, but, I mean...
And it's just worth emphasising...
You wouldn't want to be a Hearts fan right now.
Oh my God. It's worth emphasising how rare it is for someone who isn't Celtic and Rangers to win, right? It's when was the last time...
Well, I think it's 66 years since Hearts have won the title. It's a really long time, and I've forgotten the year that Aberdeen won the title, but that is the last
Ferguson,
time when Alex Ferguson was
extraordinary.
The manager of Aberdeen. I mean, yeah, a really, really good title race also going on in the Scottish Prem. I also want to mention as well Marcus Rashford at the weekend, yesterday in fact, in the El Clasico, scoring a goal that set them on the way to a 2-0 victory. So Barca are champions, beating Real Madrid yesterday 2-0, and they are champions. And it just sort of throws up the question, what's going to happen to Marcus Rashford now? Does he stay at Barcelona?
But either way, great respect for him, because there was a lot of criticism. I've now forgotten under which Man United manager it was. They've changed it so much. But everyone said, oh, he doesn't work that hard. He's in it for the money. He took a pay cut to go to Barcelona.
I think he had to.
Not
wherever he went.
No, right, but not guaranteed to start. And he's, you know, won La Liga and been a great player for them.
He's done something. I don't know if you saw the boxing at the weekend as well. I think we should quickly mention an amazing fight happening in Manchester at the weekend. Fabio Wardley against Daniel Dubois. Daniel Dubois won in the end, but Fabio Wardley had him down twice inside the first 3 rounds. It was brutal. People who went to it said it's one of the greatest heavyweight fights they have ever seen. In the end, Wardley, battered and bruised, was stopped in the 11th, and Daniel Dubois is heavyweight world champion again, claiming the WBO title. Extraordinary fight. I'm sure there'll probably be a rematch there.
What do we got up next? Are we doing World Cup tickets? No. Is that up next?
World Cup ticket? No. We're going to be talking about maybe my.
I think we should be talking about Jackie's walk.
I agree.
Jackie, the greatest sporting achievement of the weekend. Our very own Jackie.
I don't know if you can call walking a sporting activity.
You can. How far did you walk, Jackie?
20k power walking. I honestly. It took me about 4 hours or so. I did walk fast because, you know, life's short, so walk fast. But I found it really hard. I think it was for a fantastic charity, Future Dreams, a breast cancer charity who've got an amazing haven in central London, in King's Cross, where people who've been diagnosed can go there, get, you know, free advice, just get, I don't know, a shoulder to cry on. Because when you go through that, you know, I think so many people are very, very frightened and just feel very alone, and it's, you know, their motto is you're not alone, there's other people in the same boat. So I walked with a lot of women who'd come through breast cancer diagnosis. A lot of us had dodgy feet, me included, because we've had chemo, and it sometimes can mess around with the nerve endings in your feet. So I was walking with the GP. I said, how are your feet? She said, I can't feel my feet have been numb for years. So yeah, it sounds like not much, it's not a marathon like Beth did, but for some people it was enough of a challenge.
I want to say this because Jackie won't say it as well, but she's been an absolute lioness and an inspiration, I think, in talking about your kind of cancer diagnosis and how you've been since, and doing the walk, and the way that you talked about it so openly. I think that there's probably an awful lot of people listening now who are familiar with your journey, and, you know... Yeah,
well, I just hope it can give people hope. If you think you're in a really desperate situation, I mean, you might be, and it might feel like that, but there's always hope. Yeah. So anyway, that was the point. That was the point of it yesterday. So thanks for everybody who joined me on social media and supported me. I was really, really appreciated.
And skipped into work this morning bright and early.
I don't know about skipping.
How the feet?
And I don't know about bright. But yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, done well. Love it.
Awesome stuff, Jackie. Well, we're out of time for this hour of the programme. We'll be back after this short break. Ongoing build-up to the Prime Minister's all-important speech at 10 a.m.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... My darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
...is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more. Well, let's kick off and make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs? He's coming out! What more do you need?
Good morning, it's 9 o'clock. Welcome to Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
Sophie and Will, good morning from me as well. Big Prime Minister speech. We're building up right to that.
The Prime Minister fights for his political life in a make-or-break speech this morning. He'll try and convince voters and his own MPs that he's the right person to lead the country.
The 20 British holidaymakers trapped aboard the Hantavirus cruise ship land back in the UK. They now face 45 days of quarantine.
President Trump prepares for tough talks over Taiwan ahead of his visit when he lands in China this week as Iran rejects his peace proposal.
We'll also be talking about calls to ban Quartz kitchen countertops to protect the people who make them from lung disease.
And in sport, Arsenal go 5 points clear at the top of the Premier League despite a major late scare against West Ham.
Good morning. Thanks for being with us. Keir Starmer is facing a moment of real peril today. After that devastating set of election results, the Prime Minister will give a speech at 10 this morning where he'll set out his answer to it. Now, speeches are often described as make or break, but this one really is. It could make or break his premiership. We'll bring it to you live.
Well, his former deputy, Angela Rayner, unleashed a broadside yesterday, criticising him for blocking Andy Burnham's Westminster return and calling on him to deliver real change for the country. Well, 2 years on from that thumping 174-seat majority, the knives are coming out. But if the Prime Minister's to go, someone senior, probably in the Cabinet, will need to make a move. We'll be analysing the Prime Minister's prospects and the fallout from that extraordinary set of election results throughout the next hour as we build up to his speech. First, here's Rob Powell summing it all up.
Angela Rayner scaling an assault course this weekend. Amid talk of a leadership race, the Greater Manchester MP has stopped short of launching a challenge. But she has laid down an ultimatum and put pressure on the Prime Minister to allow a senior colleague back into the Westminster fray. In a statement, she said, "It is time to acknowledge that blocking Andy Burnham was a mistake. We must show we understand the scale of change the moment calls for. That means bringing our best players into Parliament. The Prime Minister must now meet the moment and set out the change our country needs." Sir Keir Starmer previously stopped the Manchester Mayor from returning to the Commons. Angela Rayner now says Labour may be facing its last chance after bruising election losses. It comes after MP Catherine West threatened her own leadership bid if senior colleagues didn't agree on a successor.
That level of inertia in the face of the election defeat that we saw on Thursday is a disgrace. Working people sent us a message on Thursday. We have to listen to that and we have to change. And we have to do it quickly.
She's called on the Cabinet to meet and come up with a plan, but ministers are refusing.
I think she's got this completely wrong. What I do recognise, however, is that Catherine, like lots of other colleagues and like lots of candidates who stood in the elections that we've just had, are really hurting this morning. And I feel that too. You know, Friday morning I felt absolutely sick to the bottom of my stomach about the scale of the defeat that we'd suffered. And we got a real kicking from the voters.
In Catherine West's North London constituency, there was some surprise among voters.
Had you heard that the local MP around here has said that she's going to challenge Keir Starmer possibly for the leadership?
I didn't know that. I didn't hear the news this morning yet.
I think it's an excellent idea.
She seems to be trying to trigger something wider, or someone else to put their hat in the ring.
Yes, let's hope she hits a bullseye.
Any of the other options that they're going to stand, because obviously I don't think it'll end up being her, she's kind of a stalking horse. I think all of the other options are probably going to be really bad.
This is an area where Labour is losing votes to other parties. Its MP now attempting to flush out a new leader who can turn things around.
Catherine West is not exactly a household name, so it's very hard to see her directly unseating the Prime Minister. But this still matters because it's an indication of how desperate some in Labour now feel about the path ahead, and because of that, it could still trigger something bigger.
West has hinted she'd like to see Angela Rayner run, but with Andy Burnham not in the Commons and not able to stand, this could all benefit Health Secretary Wes Streeting the most. No surprise then that left-wing MPs are worried.
We need a proper, full democratic process, not some sort of palace coup or coronation rushed through in a matter of days. And I'm really concerned that what Catherine's proposed could be exploited by people on the right of the party who want to close down the contest and end up with a coronation.
Sir Keir Starmer will launch a fight back this week with a speech. Catherine West says she could launch a challenge after that, unless someone else moves sooner. His former deputy now also breathing down his neck, a Prime Minister at risk of being overcome by events. Rob Powell, Sky News in North London.
Well, Rob Powell there, I think, kind of talking about some of the runners and riders, some of the potential contenders, people that we're going to be watching very closely to see how they'll react to the speech from the Prime Minister. One of them, of course, Andy Burnham. Just listen to what Peter Carl, the Business Secretary, said about Andy Burnham, because he was pretty forceful when we spoke to him a bit earlier.
Andy Burnham left Westminster to go to Manchester and he made a series of promises. I think promises matter.
So he should stay in Manchester?
I think promises matter in politics and he should see that promise through.
Get out to Lucy's in Downing Street for us. Lucy, we're less than an hour now away from the Prime Minister's speech. Just a few minutes ago, he's tweeted, "Strength through fairness, hope for the future, real answers to the challenges facing our country." If this tweet, which is obviously to tease the speech as opposed to the speech itself, is a hint of what's to come, then it feels like more of the same, not some drastic new step that will change the narrative.
I think that's fair to say. We've heard a fair bit already from the Prime Minister since those really catastrophic election results for them. He, on Saturday, spoke about recognising the scale of the challenge that lies ahead for the party. We expect him, as you say, in less than an hour, to come out and say that incremental change no longer does the job, that Labour needs to stick to Labour values, Labour policies. Like you say, we've heard this before from the Prime Minister. We have also heard an intention to get Britain closer to the European Union. We expect him in less than an hour to say that Britain should be at the heart of Europe. I think what will determine his future is whether or not his Labour MPs feel that he is radical enough. And as you say, from what we've seen so far, I don't think they are going to be that surprised by what they hear from the Prime Minister. On Saturday, Number 10 very clearly really pushed to show backbenchers that he is taking a number of steps. So he brought back Harriet Harman, Gordon Brown into advisory roles, maybe a message to backbenchers that he is listening, that he is willing to take advice from people that have been critical friends of his leadership. Today, the next steps, and I suppose throughout the week, we are likely to get more. But this is a moment at which the majority of MPs will decide, is he the man to carry on leading this party? Has he done enough to convince us that he has what it takes? Many are questioning that, to say the very least.
I have to say as well, there was another moment in the Peter Carl interview that I'm keen to get your thoughts on, Lucy, which is when he said that, West Streeting couldn't possibly be running for the leadership because he spent the weekend watching The Devil Wears Prada with him. Let's just have a listen to what Peter Carl said.
After we campaigned, we went for dinner and we went and saw a movie together. Somebody who was planning to pull the plug and launch a leadership bid in a couple of days' time doesn't go to the cinema with a friend.
What did you go and see?
Devil Wears Prada.
Did you?
Yeah.
What do you reckon then? Cut and dry case?
Well, Wes Streeting's team denies that that Wes Streeting is planning to immediately oust the Prime Minister. I almost think you could flip this the other way and say that if you were trying to take over from the Prime Minister, wouldn't you go and watch a film like Devil Wears Prada, full of egos? I mean, I don't know if not everybody watching will have seen The Devil Wears Prada, but Queen Miranda Priestley at the top of the helm at that magazine, would you not want to see how she does it, take some advice from the pros? So, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily believe. Also, Devil Wears Prada is, 2.5 hours long, so you'd still have other time throughout the weekend to plan some kind of plot. What I would say is that maybe what saves the Prime Minister still is that there is no clear successor to him. Not everybody in the Labour Party is behind one singular person. We will see how this all plays out, I think, over the next 24, 48 hours.
Lucy, great stuff. And as we've said throughout, we'll be continuing the build-up to the Prime Minister live at 10 a.m. so less than an hour away. Meanwhile, President Trump is heading to Beijing this week for a crucial summit with China's leader Xi Jinping. The trip was supposed to happen in March but got pushed back because of the Iran war.
So on the agenda, the US-China trade war, Taiwan, and of course the war in Iran as well. Here's Sky's Asia correspondent Helen Ann Smith with the latest.
This summit is being described as potentially historic, and I think the reason for that is very much that context of the Iran war. Look, it's not as if these two leaders haven't met before. This isn't even the first time they've met within Donald Trump's second term, but it is the first time that they've met during the second term on one of their home turfs, if you like. And that broader context of the global volatility that we're now living in because of the Iran war, I mean, it truly weakens Donald Trump's hand coming here to China, coming to these negotiations. And crucially, China see it as a really golden opportunity, an opening, if you like, to really push for some of the things that they want. Now, look, I'm sure over the coming days, we are going to talk a lot on your programme. We're going to talk through all the minutiae. We're going to be talking trade and tariffs and investment and soybeans and AI chips and all sorts. But it's still over 48 hours until Trump is here. So we've been running a report this morning and through the day on Sky News that just takes a closer look at one of the issues that really is so central to what China cares about, that it will be really using this opportunity, this moment of arguable relative weakness from Trump's side to really push for. And that is the issue of Taiwan, the self-governing island that China sees as part of its territory, that it has sworn to retake by force if necessary. Now, look, ideally, China would really prefer not to fight a war over Taiwan. It doesn't want to. It would be costly and hugely damaging to its international standing. It would love a peaceful solution. And crucially, it sees in Donald Trump perhaps one of the best opportunities it has ever had to make progress on that. They see him as a transactional president. They see him as distracted. They see him as not really prioritising Taiwan, not a big issue for him, they think. He comes here weakened, as we've said. And look, he's made no secret of the fact that he respects strongman leaders like Xi Jinping, and that he respects the idea of a superpower's backyard. So all of this the Chinese see as vitally important and almost exciting, I think. So look, we travelled to the island of Taiwan to really try and get under the skin of how people there are feeling about it, how likely this might all be. And look, I've reported from this region for years now, and I've been to Taiwan many times, and the palpable anxiety there truly is notable, and it is growing. And you really get a sense there that people know that their fate is precarious, and they believe their fate is precarious while Donald Trump is in the White House. So look, it is one of so many things that will be discussed this week, but be in no doubt it is one of the issues that China will be really pushing for. You can see my full report on the Sky News YouTube page and throughout the day on Sky News as well. And just remember, Taiwan, trade, tariffs, all the other things they will talk about this week, they will all be seen via this important lens of superpower competition. That's what everything comes down to. That's what will matter this week.
Helen Ann Smith there for us. Well, in light of the US rejecting Iran's counter-peace proposals, let's have a look what it's done to markets. And oil prices are up off the back of it, as you might expect, up 3% to about 104, 105 on Brent. And, of course, it does follow a very significant improvement last week, in part because people wondered whether President Trump's summit with President Xi in Beijing would be something to pressure the US into striking a peace deal. Clearly, despite that looming trip to Beijing for President Trump in the next coming days, no peace deal has been reached ahead of that. So oil prices, as we said, on the rise a little bit again, and very much still above $100 a barrel. Let's have a look at UK borrowing costs in light of this. Again, you're seeing a move this morning at the open, up slightly as oil prices have risen slightly. I think the bigger takeaway, though, last week was as sort of good a week as you might get in terms of good news on the war. The oil price pulled back a lot, but borrowing costs didn't really pull back much. This is the UK 10-year chart, and as you can see, it rose sharply at the start of the war, and it's been pretty persistent because really any oil price above $100, where we've persisted, is very bad for the UK's finances. So these moves in and around just below 5%, just above 5%, are all rather marginal to the scale of the move we've increased. And today, by the way, as well, of course, there's a bit of that political premium pressure on the Prime Minister doesn't help, and UK borrowing costs back near that 5% level, though currently sitting just below it on the UK 10-year gilt.
We'll, of course, keep a very close eye on all those things that impact so many of us, the UK economy and, of course, the pockets of people here in the UK as well. In the meantime, just to give you an update on the Hantavirus cruise ship, because 20 British people who were trapped on board that ship have now arrived back in the UK. They landed in Manchester last night. They're currently in an isolation unit on the Wirral Peninsula. 8 confirmed suspected cases in total, 3 people sadly dying, and the condition of a French passenger also said to be deteriorating. Let's go to Shingi Maruki, who is at the Arrow Park Hospital on the Wirral. Shingi, what can you tell us?
Well, Sophie, those British nationals began their 72 hours of self-isolation here at Arrow Park Hospital late yesterday night. We now know that they will be here until they are cleared, if they're asymptomatic, and allowed to go home or to other suitable addresses. If they are not, they'll be taken to Royal Liverpool Hospital, which is the centre for infectious and tropical diseases in this part of the country. Those who are allowed to go home will then be forced to self-isolate for a further 42 days. And in terms of yesterday, I think a lot of people will have drawn parallels with those images, that bus coming in here and that convoy of emergency vehicles with the beginning of the COVID outbreak, because they came to the same hospital to bring the first Brits from Wuhan here as well. So they're used to having to deal with this sort of situation. They've taken a number of precautions. So where we are is very far away from the buildings where those people who are in quarantine are being housed for now. We know that it's in a separate part of the building used for staff. We also know that in terms of the public health messaging around hantavirus versus COVID, this is a far less transmissible disease, which is why the WHO as well as public health authorities are telling people not to be alarmed. And thinking about those people here who made that journey from Tenerife before being transferred here from Manchester Airport, they'll be wondering how so much changed in the month in which they set off for a journey which they're hoping to see some of the wonders of the world, and instead they end here in self-isolation on the Wirral.
Shingi, as always, great stuff. Thanks so much, Shingi Maruki, for us there. Right, we're building up to the Prime Minister's speech, of course, due in about 40 minutes' time. At the top of the hour, we'll have it for you live, of course. Let's speak now to Sir Keir Starmer's former Director of Communications, James Lyons. Very good morning to you, James. Good to see you.
Morning.
Speech like this, written right up until the last minute for the Prime Minister? Is he rehearsing it as we speak? Talk us through what will be going through his mind right now.
Well, first of all, I think we need to reflect on what an extraordinary weekend it has been. There was a Mexican standoff going on in the Labour Party between Angela Rayner and Wes Streeting. And what Catherine West has done is thrown a grenade into that. And it's unclear at this point where it's going to end. But, yeah, of course, you'll be fine-tuning the speech up to the last. I imagine the Prime Minister will have had at least one read-through in the Cabinet room. You normally put a podium at one end of the Cabinet table, and you'll have aides gathered around the table listening in, and just to check how hear it coming out, and just see how it lives off the page, as it were.
And would this have been written 2 or 3 weeks ago, or 2 weeks ago, the large part of it based on, we need a speech ready to go if the locals are terrible, we need one to go if they're OK, mid-level, or not? And
I think that I suspect they won't have bothered to write a version for if the locals went OK. Rightly so. And look, there will be a collection of aides who will kind of sit around and kick around some ideas and kick around some kind of structure, and then talk to the Prime Minister about that and get some feedback, and there will be drafts going back and forth. And then, as I say, you'll have an actual read-through to see how it sounds when the Prime Minister actually delivers it.
We've been saying it's make or break, this speech. Do you agree with that?
The stakes were already sky high before Catherine West made her surprise declaration over the weekend. And it's good to see that Gordon Brown hasn't lost his Midas touch. He was a government advisor for a matter of hours before a leadership attempt was always launched. I think the danger for the Prime Minister is he saved his premiership earlier this year with an impassioned speech to the Parliamentary Labour Party during yet another instalment of the Peter Mandelson scandal. It's a difficult trick to pull off twice, and the danger for him is that there is more weight being put on this speech than any speech can bear.
If the sort of central gist of it is we're going to start moving back towards the EU. Is that a game changer or not?
It's unclear to me that saying you're going to move back towards Europe, or the heart of Europe, as I think we expect the Prime Minister to say, is the answer to a kind of reform surge. Of course, it is very popular with Labour Party activists and Labour Party members and many Labour Party voters. But the problem is the PM is being outflanked on Europe by the Greens and by the Liberal Democrats, who are just like, well, let's just rejoin. Whereas he is hemmed in by the red lines in the Labour Party manifesto. So there's no rejoining the customs union, no free movement, no single market. So he's hemmed in by those red lines. And the danger is he's not going far enough to please the pro-Europeans, while angering voters in the kind of red wall seats who voted for Brexit. And the big danger with this as well is like, A, do you really want to be telling those voters, I told you so, which is how it might risk coming over? And B, I think one of the reasons that Boris Johnson did so well in the general election is, if you remember, he said, we'll get Brexit done. And I think there's a feeling in the country that we just want to stop talking about this. We want to move past it. So resurrecting it now, even if the polls show that lots of people want to rejoin, I think people are just going to be head in hands.
Is it possible for him to articulate a position that says, I'm here, I'm committed, I'm going to fight, but I won't stand at the next general election, whether explicitly or hints at that, and still survive? Or does that open its own can of worms?
I think that does open a can of worms, but, he opened a can of worms over the weekend by saying he intended to do another 10 years. It was exactly that sort of statement that helped to do for Boris Johnson and even back in the day, Margaret Thatcher. So, I think...
Can you undo that to some extent, or is it...
It's incredible. I think it is incredibly difficult, right? So, Catherine West can trigger a contest just by writing to the National Executive Committee of the Labour Party. Wes Streeting has obviously said he won't trigger a contest, but once that contest is triggered, who knows? Who knows? It does feel like a sliding doors moment for Wes Streeting. It could be now or never. But how all of this plays out is incredibly uncertain. There is a real effort going on at the moment by supporters of Andy Burnham to try and slow this down and give him a route back into Parliament so that he can stand. And, it was clear that a significant proportion of the Parliamentary Labour Party had coalesced behind Andy, and the plan was to get him back in. And Catherine West has upset that apple cart. What happens if the contest is triggered and, Wes Streeting, for example, did decide to stand and they can't get Andy Burnham back in? Well, some people are suggesting that the soft left would then turn to Ed Miliband.
In light of all of that, those moving parts, why isn't Wes Streeting triggering this contest? Isn't this his moment?
Well, I think he is of the view that, if you wield the dagger, you don't wear the crown, and he's repeatedly said that he isn't going to trigger a contest, so I think it'd be quite difficult for him to do that. But as I say, under the rules, he doesn't need to.
Just finally, you said earlier that the speech is set up in a way that it almost can't bear the pressure. Is it right to conclude from that you think this is it for the Prime Minister? His time is, whether it's in a day or a week or a month, his time is up?
Look, you don't win very much money betting on Labour getting rid of its leader, right? It doesn't happen very often. And I'm old enough to remember all the coup attempts against Gordon Brown, which included actually Harriet Harman going into number 10 to tell him to leave and then coming out saying that she supported him. But it's fascinating that, that only 4 leaders in the Labour Party's 100-plus years history have won a general election. And it now looks like we might be seeing the only 2 to have done that in the last 50 years, Tony Blair and Keir Starmer, being forced out by Labour MPs.
After different lengths of time in office. James, thanks so much for joining us. Good to see you, and we'll continue our build-up, of course, to That all-important speech from the Prime Minister at the top of the hour. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll also have more on Sky News' extraordinary report on the debilitating lung disease affecting more and more stonemasons working on luxury kitchens.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
People are directly protesting.
The whole neighborhood has rallied around her.
It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan. I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter? Perfect. Let's bring you some breaking news. Being a Sky News presenter. I began by asking...
Thank you so much.
...trusting us to tell her story. The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access. Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
Welcome back. A rising number of workers producing luxury kitchens are dying from an incurable lung disease that experts warn could be the new asbestos.
Stonemasons being diagnosed with a disease called silicosis, and it's working with quartz kitchen countertops. Now, it might be something you've got in your own kitchen, but there's certainly, I think, growing concerns over health concerns about the manufacture of this. We can talk now. I think we can have a look now at Sky's Katie Barnfield's film on this, a warning the report does contain references to suicide.
Why are kitchen worktops killing people?
They didn't hold back. They literally told me that it could potentially kill you. And it's just, well, what's going on?
It just beats you down and beats you down every time you go back to the specialist. Hey, guess what? The news is worse. By the way, there's no treatment.
You might have quartz worktops like these in your own kitchen, but did you know they're causing a deadly disease that's taking the lives of young workers?
I'm absolutely sure there are people who have silicosis who are unaware that they have it walking around the UK at the moment.
So is this the new asbestos, and how do we stop it?
The UK needs to ban this product. It's like, sorry.
We don't get a grip of this condition, we'll see another national scandal like we saw in asbestos.
Talk to Katie about this now. I think the thing that gets me about this is just how common Quartz worktops are. I mean, they're everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely everywhere. I mean, they've absolutely exploded in popularity in the past 10 years or so. They're all over kind of social media or on home renovation accounts. They are now one of the most popular, if not the most popular, worktop material in the UK, and yet many people don't know about this at all. I mean, silicosis was kind of a forgotten workplace disease up until now. It affected a lot of coal miners in the kind of 1920s to the 1950s, but we're now seeing this huge spike in cases because of working with quartz, otherwise known as engineered stone, worktops, because the way that they're made, the cutting process releases huge levels of this dust called breathable silica. And it's affecting really young tradesmen, people in their 20s, 30s and 40s, who are getting this kind of rapidly accelerating disease. So they're getting very, very sick within just a few years of working with it. In fact, the consultant that we talked to for this piece, she said the youngest person that she's treating is just 23. So it is a huge concern.
And it's just the manufacturing process. If you've got one in your kitchen, not a worry, right?
Yes, absolutely right. If it's installed in your kitchen, it is not dangerous to you, but it is very dangerous to the people that are working with this. A lot of the time, this is people working, in conditions where, they're dry cutting, they're not wearing the appropriate PPE, things like that. That is causing a spike in these cases. We have had an announcement from the Health and Safety Executive this morning on this. They've said they're introducing new guidance showing that wet cutting is a legal requirement. They're also doing an inspection programme of 1,000 worktop fabricators over the next year. But that, importantly, stops short of a full ban on engineered stone worktops. That is something many people are calling for. All the major construction unions in the UK told us they want to see a ban, but at the moment, it doesn't seem like that's on the table, in the UK at least.
Casey Croser, thanks so much, and full report available on the Sky News website and app. Now, because we're going to be building up at the top of the hour to the Prime Minister's speech, we are bringing forward the sport, and it was another massive Premier League weekend, in fact, across many leagues. But the Premier League weekend, top and bottom, was embodied by the game yesterday afternoon.
Yep.
West Ham versus Arsenal. Talk us through it, Jackie.
So, was it the biggest VAR decision ever made? That's the question being posed by pretty much all of the football writers this morning. What happened was there was a chaotic, I suppose, 7 minutes at the end of the match. And I think West Ham fans thought they got a 1-1 draw out of that. And Arsenal, head and hands for Arteta, thinking we've blown it again in the dying seconds of a match by dropping points when we were in a controlling position. But let's have a look at how the whole thing unfolded. So first of all, Leandro Trossard gave Arsenal the lead pretty late on, 83rd minute, even though Arsenal had controlled large parts of the match. I think they'd found it very frustrating and it had become quite nerve-wracking, I think, for them and for the fans as the match wore on. Now, what were you thinking, Wilf, when this went in?
Oh.
This is Callum Wilson equalising.
He thought
he'd equalised. But then came the VAR decision which ruled out that goal, and it was ruled that Pablo has been holding on to Raya's arm and neck, and there were numerous fouls in that box, but this is considered to be the outstanding one, and that goal was disallowed. Have a look on the back page of the Mail. It's pretty much the same picture in all of the papers, where you can see exactly why this goal has been ruled out. I think most people are saying, yeah, it was the right decision. If you're a West Ham fan, you are devastated. And I think the problem that West Ham had was there's no consistency in these situations. There's so much grappling in the box. What is a foul? What is not a foul? Nobody seems to know.
I mean, look, as an Arsenal fan, saved by VAR yesterday, but easy for me to say in the morning, I continue my position. I think it's appalling VAR. We should get rid of it.
Well, it's the killer of joy, isn't it? You think you've got a goal, and then
even when it saves you can conclude the next morning how poor it is.
Yeah, and from an Arsenal fan, that's quite a gracious thing to say, I think, after that.
No, but we say it all season. We benefited yesterday, and I think it was, in fact, the right decision. It was a foul, but it could easily
have gone the other way. And the fact is, that's impacted West Ham, that's impacted Spurs, who were kind of cheering on Arsenal bizarrely yesterday to get a result, because that makes their job of surviving a bit easier. And, Forest are safe now, mathematically. I mean, they sort of did their work by getting a draw, but they are now safe because West Ham did not win that match. And if you think that's nerve-wracking, if you're a Hearts fan, you must have your heart in your mouth right now.
Oh.
Just 1 point separates Celtic, who won in the Old Firm derby yesterday, 3-1 beating Rangers. 1 point separates them. Hearts, 77 points. Celtic, 76 points. 2 games to go. Last week of the title chase, and Celtic got to play Motherwell away. Motherwell have been brilliant all season. Hearts dropped points to them this weekend, and they all play each other. Well, they all play each other, but
you couldn't write
the
this.
two protagonists play each other on the very last day of the season.
Not sure if we're allowed to say it, but I'm rooting for Hearts. Got to be.
Neutrals.
Neutrals, yeah, exactly.
Jackie, great stuff. Thanks very much. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll continue our build-up to the Prime Minister's speech at the top of the hour.
It is a massive political day. I think it is fair to say that the Prime Minister's premiership now hangs in the balance, and all eyes on what he does at 10 a.m. when he's going to try and deliver a speech to save his premiership and to convince his own MPs, really, that they shouldn't move against him. Give him time, he's the right man for the job.
We're joined now by Scarlett Maguire, who's the founder of Poland consultancy firm Merlin Strategies. Very good morning. Thanks for joining us. One of the bits of polling you've been doing in and around the local elections is sort of what people think of the Prime Minister as we await for the speech. And where does he stand in terms of strong leadership versus weak leadership?
He is overwhelmingly seen to be a weak leader, and I think one of the problems that Keir Starmer has is that I've never actually seen anything quite like it. You know, you've been doing focus groups when Boris Johnson was at the height of his unpopularity, talking about figures like Jeremy Corbyn. There's no one who's managed to unite the country quite so much in their dislike of him, you know, from across the political spectrum. And over again, the word you hear in focus groups and then you can see in data when you poll it is this word weak.
And I think we can hear from some of the people you spoke to, right, in a focus group. Let's have a listen.
Labour Prime Minister weak.
I just put weak.
I put down weak as well. Labour leader weak.
OK, I would say he's weak and ineffectual.
Weak.
I had incompetent.
Disappointing.
For Starmer, I think he's a total wet wipe.
I wrote down spineless.
I put down puppet, no backbone.
In 3 words. I didn't even think of 3 words. I just thought of one. He's a liar.
I think we've got a government that do not know how to govern. Every single thing that they promised was a lie.
It's brutal, isn't it? Absolutely brutal.
It is brutal. As I said, I've never seen anything quite like it, and this has been consistent for months. So he won praise for his handling of Iran, but the fundamental impressions of him did not change. This was actually at a time when, the praise of his handling of Iran was more in the news, and you can still see that was voters' impressions of him.
Obviously, at the locals, Labour lost a lot of votes, both to Reform and to the Greens. What is your polling and research suggesting it will take, as we await this speech of the Prime Minister at 10 a.m, it will take to win those people back?
I think it would take more than a speech. So, I'm sure this speech is directed more at MPs than necessarily the public. I think most of the public won't even notice. There has been one. They won't tune in anymore. We've had quite a few of these reset speeches. But it's going to take very fundamental change to how they perceive their living standards in this country. Labour came to power in 2024 for promise of change. It's why they managed to persuade people to vote for them in the first place. And I think what's very interesting is Labour is getting a bit distracted, or parts of Labour, about do we go left, do we go right? There's a threat from more votes to the Greens, but we lost more seats to Reform. But I think that's all a bit of a non sequitur, actually, because fundamentally the voters that are now leaving Labour for Greens and Reform are the ones that want change the most. And they're the ones that feel the most under pressure from the cost of living, and they just do not feel like the economy and the system is working for them.
That's interesting, actually, that it's the change thing, not necessarily the left-right split, old-fashioned way of looking at politics. We've got what do they call these? They call them word clouds.
Word clouds,
right? So word cloud that you did that I think maybe shows that change point very, very well. Because I think you're right. Look, here we go. Thinking about the local election, why are you voting for the party you're voting for? Look, that word says it all, right?
Exactly. So, and again, we polled this with Charlesby strategy. This was before the local elections, and we just said, what are you voting for at the local elections? To those people that were voting, and you can see overwhelmingly the largest word there was change. And again, this came through really strongly in all the qualitative research as well. People are desperate for change.
What is your takeaway from the results of the locals in terms of how repeatable that will be going forward? Do you think this is a sea change moment in our politics, the party system, or is it your typical midway through a parliament protest vote?
I definitely don't think it's midterm blues, that's for sure. However, I also don't think it was a sea change. I actually think it just confirmed a lot of data points we already had that spoke to this restructuring of how the public feel about the traditional parties, about the current political settlement. And so we'd already seen indications of this in previous by-elections, even in the results that we had in the 2024 election, and certainly polling. And I've heard a lot of people say it's a protest vote. That's not going to matter when people continue to protest at the general election. The point that it's a protest vote doesn't mean it's just going to go away.
I don't know what you think about this, but I went to Tameside, Greater Manchester, ahead of the vote, and just talked to loads of people there, which I always find unbelievably useful, just to get a bit of a sense about where people's heads are at. Look, they said exactly the same thing about Labour. It felt to me like the Conservatives was total irrelevance, and I think those election results kind of bore that out. There might be a couple of green shoots in London, but it wasn't that widespread. But I also didn't really get the sense people were voting for Reform or the Greens because they loved them either. It was almost like, I just hate them all. I don't trust any of them, so I'm just going to put my tick here.
I think that's spot on for an awful lot of the electorate. And now, actually, we're in this interesting position where they've never had more choices for them in terms of potentially viable parties. You have 5 in England, 6 in Scotland and Wales. And yet a majority of people in this country now feel that a political party doesn't represent them, even with all those choices. So it really is I'm not satisfied with how the country's going. The Conservatives and Labour have both messed it up over the past 14 years, or they don't seem up to the job. But I also don't have a huge amount of faith in the Greens and Reform to fix it. But I'm just going to try it and see if it works.
Obviously, one thing that is a big change, or would be, a big change, hypothetically, is a change in leader. How much repairing of the current polling for the Labour Party could that achieve, do you think?
It is a lever that's still open to them. If you think about how Boris Johnson turned around the Conservative Party's fortunes in the short term after the 2019 European elections results, it could theoretically change. I think if Keir Starmer stays leader, I don't see Labour's polling changing at all, really. The public's views of him are so ingrained. So it could help, but I think it's an uphill battle.
You see, this is it, because you hear from people in Number 10 or allies of Starmer, we can't do the same thing as the Tories. Chopping and changing leader made it worse. But actually, I guess there is an argument that, choosing Boris Johnson made it better. They won that big landslide officer at the back. Sticking with Liz Truss would have been
Exactly.
worse. So I guess it's not necessarily the best example.
No, I don't think it's always the best example. And again, I think it can be a slight two-dimensional reading of public opinion. You did hear from the public after the Conservatives went through several leaders in a short period of time. This is getting ridiculous. You know, this is silly. We want an end to this drama. But because they wanted delivery to deliver change, you know, so it's like if there's someone that can do that better, then I think the public would wear it.
Scott, great stuff. Thanks so much. Really appreciate it. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to continue our build-up to the Prime Minister's all-important speech, which is just 15 minutes away, with Sam Coates and Lucy McDade on the other side of this short break. Don't go anywhere.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling.
It's not his country, it's ours.
Sky News, the full story first, free wherever you get your news. It's half an hour now past the deadline that Hamas issued, and we've now seen a third barrage of rockets coming in.
Gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place and all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
There seems to be some sort of a shooting. What appear to be shots fired at the White House Correspondents' Dinner.
It was a jam-packed interview. I'll tell you what he told me, and I'll explain why you can't hear the call.
100 days in and back with the grassroots of this MAGA movement.
It feels a little bit like he's a king, not a president.
He is a king.
I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here, but the anger too.
Immigration rates?
Unbelievable we've come to this.
I'm observing what you're doing.
This post of Trump, it's a big shift. It's very positive.
Have you seen what Donald Trump's been up to? In the Rose Garden, in the East Wing.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist. A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... My darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
Is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more.
Well, let's kick off and make a statement.
What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs?
He's coming out! What more do you need?
Welcome back. Just 15 minutes to go until the Prime Minister's all-important speech. Lucy's in Downing Street for us. Sam is here on set. Sam, I'll come to you first of all. We've been using this phrase, make or break all morning. Is that fair?
So I think it's a make or break appearance. I'm not even quite sure it's a make or break speech. What do I mean by that? I mean, when has a Keir Starmer speech ever really over-delivered? I actually think the real significance of what we're about to hear is in the questions and answers. I'll tell you, I don't know who's going to be in the room apart from our Beth Rigby, but I can guess some of the questions. One, are you going to allow Andy Burnham to stand? If he says no, I think that his own future might be in doubt, in jeopardy, almost immediately. He will also be asked, are you going to set out a timetable for your departure, or are you determined to stay all the way through to the end of this Parliament and beyond? And if he gives the same answer that he gave on Friday and Saturday, which is he wants 10 years, effectively, then again, I think that that will potentially shorten his time in Downing Street. We're in a weird situation. There are very few Labour MPs that think that Keir Starmer is doing well, And I would say a majority of them probably don't want him to fight the next election. But there are lots of different camps that want lots of different outcomes. Some want him to go now. For instance, those that think that Wes Streeting might be the best Prime Minister because he's well placed at the moment to potentially lead a leadership bid. There are others that want Keir Starmer gone but don't want a leadership contest now because they want Andy Burnham. He's not an MP. He won't be an MP at the earliest until the other side of the autumn, the other side of the summer. So they want a contest, but they don't want it until maybe September, October or so. Lots of different motivations, a lot of them personal, a lot of them, as far as some MPs are concerned, selfish, particularly when it comes to the cabinet. But that's why how Keir Starmer answers the questions might actually be more important than the sort of slightly vague homilies and the slightly coded hints about our future in Europe that you tend to get from his speeches.
Yeah, I think that is very thoughtful analysis. It's when I was just listening to you there, like the two key questions: should Andy Burnham stand, and how long do you want to be PM for? I mean, the first one we got a bit of a hint of it from Peter Kyle this morning, right? He was sent out by Number 10, so he's, I guess, has got the kind of the line from Number 10 saying Andy Burnham should not be leaving Manchester, that he shouldn't be breaking his promise. I mean, that's not going to go down very well if Keir Starmer says that.
No, absolutely not. I wonder whether that is the same position as Keir Starmer, though. Peter Kyle, I think most people would think he was on the right of the Labour Party. I think if he stands for anything at all, it's stopping kind of the Andy Burnhams and Ed Miliband's of this world from getting into Number 10. He sees them as a gateway to the almost Corbynista left coming back into the party at the highest levels. So I think he would go a little bit further than maybe Keir Starmer, who ultimately we think of really at his heart as a bit of a soft left politician who was dressed up in kind of modernising language by his one-time aide, Morgan McSweeney, ultimately leaving people to ask who is the politician at the heart of that enigma. But we think his gut is a little bit more... I mean, by the way, I'm told that he doesn't much like Wes Streeting or Andy Burnham. I was trying to game who he would end up helping a bit more.
Yeah, who's the Keir Starmer?
And I was told by a very close ally of Keir Starmer, he doesn't like them either much.
But the problem, I guess this is part of the problem for him, like, who is his team? I mean, I have wondered this, you know, he's not like a kind of political beast in the same way that so many of them are, which, by the way, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but I think it is a problem if you're fighting for your political life.
By the way, hang on, are you talking about Keir Starmer or Andy Burnham? Like it could, well, but in a funny way, it applies to both, because we're in this world where, look at Andy Burnham, there are huge amounts of hopes and dreams from factions within the Labour Party that project a certain type of politics onto the Metro Mayor of Manchester and kind of just hope that he delivers that. But will he? What does he really think? Does he have the political courage, strength, track record, policy depth and team around him to do all of that? You know, his team in Manchester's tiny, still evolving, and they're still looking for people.
He said different things at different times of his career as well, right?
Lucy, I wanted to come and bring you in Downing Street. In terms of just the action that we've seen there this morning or not, there's obviously been some coming and goes, but we were kind of just talking about the scale of support and people around him the Prime Minister kind of has at the moment, or maybe doesn't.
Yeah, I think we've seen over the weekend the Cabinet broadly rallying around the Prime Minister, making arguments that now is not the time for a leadership contest. We've heard this before, but there's a war in the Middle East. The impact that it's having on the cost of living here, you know, it would not help the situation to have a leadership contest right now. Emma Reynolds, the Environment Secretary, was on Sky News on Saturday. Peter Kyle echoing the same as her this morning, that Andy Burnham is doing a brilliant job as the Mayor of Greater Manchester. In other words, stay put, Andy, don't come to Westminster, which is different to what some backbench MPs are saying. They feel that he is the only figure in the party now that can save it from what some have been saying over the weekend is an existential crisis, the brink of extinction. We have seen a real push from Downing Street to position the Prime Minister in a place where he is trying to shore up support, convince people that he can continue as leader of the party. So on Saturday we saw him on Downing Street shaking hands with Baroness Harriet Harman, Gordon Brown, bringing them in special advisory roles. Today, in this speech, we expect him to say that incremental change is no longer good enough, that the Labour Party will stick to Labour values, only Labour policy can keep it moving forward and can cater to the needs of everybody across the country. But it's whether or not we hear anything radically different from the Prime Minister we haven't heard already. And I think Labour MPs are right now expecting something pretty extraordinary from Keir Starmer to make them believe that they can fully support him moving forward. It's whether or not we get that. From what we've seen trailed this morning, it doesn't really feel like we're going to get anything different from the Prime Minister.
Sam, if you're Wes Streeting, and there is the prospect of Andy Burnham being an MP again at some point later this year, and indeed there's a prospect that this speech might set out a possibility of that becoming a reality, why haven't you gone over the top already?
It's a great question. By the way, some people think that the speech is essentially a 2-year-old wish list. You know, you listen to how Lucy described the overnight trail. Those are things that argue, you know, not incremental change, big change. You know, we're almost 2 years in. And that goes, I think, a bit to answer your question. I think there are 2 reasons why Wes Streeting hasn't gone over the top. The first is he doesn't want to be first mover because there is a fear that the sort of damage he'll do to himself by wielding the knife would make a sort of leadership bid effectively unsustainable. And secondly, I think there are some around Wes Streeting that just want to be sure. There is a history in the Labour Party of kind of tending to go for the further left of the 2 candidates in the contest. There tends to be a sort of more right, more left figure in a lot of situations. And the party's sort of emotional heart is on the left. And Wes Streeting is very much on the right. And he needs to nail a sort of, you know, a relationship with some members on the left. Like, you've got figures like Richard Bergen and John McDonnell effectively saying, let's not have a leadership contest now, specifically to spike Wes Streeting's guns. So there are, you know, if this is his one shot at it, you want to be absolutely sure that you're aiming at the target. And at the moment, everything is shaking a bit, and you just can't be sure about that.
Can I ask about Angela Rayner as well? Because she also put out this statement yesterday that I've been trying to kind of get my head around and work out what she means by it, and struggling, I'll be totally honest. Because she firstly says that Keir Starmer shouldn't block Andy Burnham. So I was like, oh, right, maybe she's kind of rowing in behind Andy Burnham. But then she puts out a policy platform of her own. What's your sense of it?
Well, a little bit of info from behind the scenes. They released that statement 45 minutes before it went public. And frankly, I think most members of the political press were WhatsApping each other going, what does that mean? Because it did send contradictory signals. First of all, it sort of lay out an alternative policy platform. And then it said that the Prime Minister needed to act urgently. But then it said, and what he really has to do is bring back Andy Burnham. Now, what do I think's going on? It was an opaque message, and I think the truth is we can't be sure. But I do take quite a strong signal from that she is beginning to accept what's absolutely evident from the polling and from a lot of MPs that you talk to, which is, you know, she struggles because she's unpopular. She's more unpopular than even Shabana Mahmood and Wes Streeting amongst the voters more generally. She hasn't resolved her tax affairs. And even when you talk to MPs, some of the ways in which she's been raising money recently, doing big calls with banks in order to sort of trading off her past and possible future role in order to get money, possibly to pay her tax fine or her tax affairs, is not popular.
Because I went to her constituency and the taxing came off quite a lot, I have to say. And I guess that MPs have just spent a time when they've been out and about knocking doors, talking to members of the public more than ever. And
Team Streeting are going around saying on his patch he won, and on Angela Rayner's patch they didn't. You know, look at the Wigan results that have quite a lot of, you know, there should be the halo effect of Andy Burnham, Angela Rayner, Lisa and Andy. You know, that council just went straightforward reform. Large bits of Manchester just sort of was drained of Labour vote, and that allowed Reform and the Greens to overtake them. And I think that there is an uncertain, what is the essay question that Labour MPs who are in charge of this process trying to answer? They're trying to make sure they've got as good a chance as possible of winning their seat, not having a leisure centre humiliation moment in 2 to 3 years' time. If they know that the person that they're potentially putting in Downing Street is unpopular with the wider votership, that doesn't help them with their predicament as much as they might like some of the values-based stuff that Angela Rayner says. I think that, you know, Labour politics is just coming to terms with that reality. But Andy Burnham's not an MP yet. And there's a big uncertainty on the left, soft left, about who their candidate is. Would it be Angela? Would it be Ed Miliband? Or do they just succeed in trying to delay Keir Starmer's departure, which I think is plan A?
We've got 2 minutes left. Of course, we'll go live as soon as the speech starts. Sam, just give me a flip side. If he does say, I'm going to throw everything at this, judge me again in a year, if it's not going well, I'll step aside. Does that create a completely different problem for a leader to have, which is you're a lame duck and you're gone anyway in a few months when people realise that you're willing to walk away?
The moment he sets out a timetable, he's a lame duck. He struggles to get things through Parliament that are controversial. There will be a sense of drift. That is just what we have seen before. It's what happens to prime ministers. But don't underestimate the chance where we end up today is just stasis all round. He doesn't publicly set out a timetable, but he doesn't block Andy Burnham coming back. But Wes Streeting doesn't go over the top, and Catherine West doesn't get the 81 letters, and we just wait to hear what happens from Andy, from the rest of the candidates.
Well, we are fast approaching 10 o'clock. It is a massive moment for the Prime Minister. It is 10 o'clock now, and that means that Keir Starmer is due any moment to give what has been billed as a make-or-break speech in the wake of those devastating local election results. He needs to get his own MPs on side. He needs to convince them that he is the man who can bring Labour to win the next election and that he needs more time. But, of course, there are plenty of people waiting in the wings.
And it's fascinating to see who is present. We saw Lucy Powell there sitting at the front and our Beth Rigby briefly speaking to her on her way, and Beth Rigby is there to pose a question to the Prime Minister, and we are expecting around about a 20-minute speech followed by around about 40 minutes of Q&A. And as we do await the Prime Minister, as we were just discussing with Sam as we build up to this, Sam, you're most focused on the Q&A more than the speech itself.
I mean, the danger with Keir Starmer's... Look, Keir Starmer can't dramatically change direction in his government, right? He doesn't have any money to spend because of the tight fiscal situation. He's bound by elements of his manifesto. He hasn't consulted his cabinet entirely. Some have been asked about the speech, but others haven't. And so all of those things mean that his room for actual manoeuvre is quite limited. Take one example. Overnight, he talked about getting closer to Europe. And some people read that as a hint that in the next manifesto, he might get rid of the red lines about customs union and single market. But other bits of government were briefing me, no, that's a nonsense, that's not happening. If this speech is full of opaque hints about possible changes of direction of travel in 2 years' time that can be read in one of two ways, then I think all of the people sitting in the audience would go, well, what's that about? Yet that was the bit that Number 10, or as it was referred to me just a few moments ago, the Number 10 blob, rather unflatteringly by somebody who's part of the conversation, that's what comes out of their kind of process. They shave off meaning. It ends up being bland and slightly indecisive. More of that, I think, is problematic. But a decisive change of direction also has its challenges.
So we're hearing that Keir Starmer is going to be, of course, walking onto the stage shortly. He's going to be introduced, interestingly, by the Labour MP Jade Botterill. She won the new seat of Oust and Denby Dale around Wakefield at the 2024 elections. So significant because she's one of these new MPs who Keir Starmer's allies would say owes her seat in the Commons to that election victory in 2024, that landslide victory from Keir Starmer. And I imagine that is the kind of subliminal messaging that they're trying to get out there with a selection of Jade Botterill to give the introduction to the Prime Minister.
Would we have expected, Sam, front row, fully lined up, all of the Cabinet to be there? Maybe they are in rows behind, but interesting.
I think it's a mark of where we are that we're not getting that. You know, if you looked at some of the statements of Cabinet Ministers in the aftermath of Friday, some of them were more lukewarm than others. If you remember, we were reading out, not wishing to pick on one Cabinet Minister in particular, Lisa Nandy's. There was no explicit backing of Keir Starmer. I was quickly told off for pointing that out. But the bottom line is that the social media post didn't say, he's our man, you know, in perpetuity. And you saw that with the stories about Ed Miliband, you know, allegedly telling Keir Starmer he's got to lay out a timetable. Even Yvette Cooper looked a bit, you know, lukewarm to me. Even Rachel Reeves didn't quite say Keir's our man for the next election. You know, maybe she has some private doubts, I think. So, yeah, you would expect the Cabinet to be out in full if they all, you know, stood by him, I think. But look at Labour politics more generally. Everybody can see that there's a problem, not just because of the local election results, but because of the sort of sense of drift and sense of lack of direction that we've been talking about for months, whether it's the Mandelson papers, whether it's rows over defence, whether it's, you know, bits of domestic policy that have just proved too chewy to solve. And I think, you know, people would laugh at us if we just said, look at them all sort of, you know, cabinets, they're all lining up.
We're going to take you to the room now. This is central London. I think we should be able to see Keir Starmer entering the room to applause. Clapping himself as well, clapping Jade Botterill, who's about to give the introduction.
Well done.
All smiles from the Prime Minister, the man who knows just how important the next hour is going to be for his premiership. He's sitting down next to Lucy Powell. Let's listen.
And I'm proud to be the Labour MP for Oust and Denby Dale in West Yorkshire. I've spent the last few months in Wakefield knocking on more doors than I could possibly count. And like many of you here, I was devastated to see the results come in and watch brilliant, hard-working friends lose their seats. They are honest, decent people, driven by a genuine desire to do right by their neighbours, who refuse to give up on their communities. What made it harder was hearing the reasons people in my community were no longer voting Labour. Time and time again, they told me they felt ignored, forgotten, overlooked. They felt that politics no longer works for them and that Britain just isn't fair anymore. It was hard because I am Labour precisely because I believe in a fairer Britain. I'm a working class northern woman, and I know I could not be on this stage were it not for the opportunities fought for and delivered by the Labour Party and the Labour movement. The NHS, minimum wage, workers' rights, a genuine social safety net, equal pay, social housing, and Sure Start centres. In fact, I first got into politics campaigning against the closure of my local Sure Start centre, having felt the direct impact it was having on the children I worked with. When I started campaigning, it was clear to me then, as it is clear to me now, that the Labour Party is one of the greatest vehicles for changing the lives of working people this country has ever known. But yet, on the doorstep, people no longer believed it. Too many places and communities are feeling left behind, feeling as if the state cares more about those trying to take from our country than those trying to contribute to it, that it doesn't care about them. We've got to address that. We must deliver for the left behind towns and cities that have seen industry leave and the institutions that formed their identity go with it. We have the opportunity and the ability to draw a line under this story of decline and division and restore hope and prosperity. And this government has already done so much to set this work in motion. But this can only happen with a Labour Party, governing with Labour values. That's why I'm pleased to introduce the man who delivered the first Labour government in a generation and has fought all his life for justice and fairness, the Prime Minister and the leader of our party, Keir Starmer.
Well, there's the introduction by the Labour MP, Jade Botterill, the new MP for Oust and Denby Dale. Let's hear from the Prime Minister.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Jay. They were such powerful words. Thank you for that introduction. The election results last week were tough, very tough. We lost some brilliant Labour representatives. That hurts, and it should hurt. I get it. I feel it. And I take responsibility. But it's not just about taking responsibility for the results. It's about taking responsibility to explain how, as a political and electoral force, we will be better and do better in the months and years ahead. Because we are not just facing dangerous times, but dangerous opponents, very dangerous opponents. This hurts not just because Labour has done badly, but because if we don't get this right, our country will go down a very dark path. So just as I take responsibility for the results, I also take responsibility for delivering the change that we promised, for a stronger and fairer Britain that we must build. I take responsibility for navigating us through a world that is more dangerous than at any time in my life. And I take responsibility for not walking away, not plunging our country into chaos as the Tories did time and again, chaos that did lasting damage to this country. A Labour government would never be forgiven for inflicting that on our country again. I know that people are frustrated by the state of Britain, frustrated by politics, and some people frustrated with me. I know I have my doubters, and I know I need to prove them wrong, and I will. So let me start on a personal note. Like every Prime Minister, I've learned a lot in the first 2 years in the job. In terms of the policy challenges that our country faces, incremental change won't cut it. On growth, defence, Europe, energy, we need a bigger response than we anticipated in 2024. Because these are not ordinary times. And this is a political challenge just as much as it's a policy challenge. Delivery is, of course, essential, but it's not sufficient on its own to address the frustration that voters feel. We're battling reform and the Greens, but at a deeper level, we're battling the despair on which they prey, despair that they exploit and amplify. And so analysis matters, but argument matters more. Evidence matters, but so too does emotion. Stories beat spreadsheets. People need hope. So we will face up to the big challenges, and we will make the big arguments, the Labour case, that only Labour values and Labour policies can ensure our country not only weathers these storms, but emerges stronger and fairer. And the Labour case, that neither Nigel Farage nor Zach Polansky offers our country the serious progressive leadership that these times demand. Of course, like every government, we've made mistakes. But we got the big political choices right. I mean, if we'd listened to the advice of other parties, right now we'd be stuck in a standoff with Iran, having been dragged into a war that is not in our interest, and I will never do that. We have invested in our public services, in people, in the pride of Britain's communities. Difficult decisions funded that. But now, NHS waiting lists are coming down. Child poverty is coming down. Immigration is coming down. And we are rebuilding from the ground up. They were the right calls. And most of all, we stabilised the economy. The fundamentals are sound. And that matters because it puts us in a much better place to come out of the conflict in Iran stronger and fairer, and for living standards to improve after 2 decades of stagnation. But that's not enough, clearly. No. For the British people, tired of a status quo that has failed them, change cannot come quickly enough. And truth be told, I'm not sure that they believe that we care. I'm not sure they believe that we see their lives. That's tough to say. When you come from a working class background like me, it's hard to hear that. Because I do know what it's like to struggle and to strive. But what I take from it is that I've spent too much time talking about what I am doing for working people and not enough time talking about why or who I stand for. Because I can see how hard life has been during these decades of crisis. I can see that very clearly. My late brother Nick spent all his adult life going from one job to the next. The status quo did not work for him. My sister is a carer, working long hours on low pay, year after year after year. She didn't even get sick pay in the pandemic. The status quo did not work for her. For too long, we've ignored people like that. And there are millions of people in that boat, millions of people who don't get the dignity, the respect, the chance that they deserve to go as far as their talent and effort should take them. Millions of people held back because the status quo in this country does not work for them. I am fighting for them. We are fighting for them. I am their Prime Minister and this is their government. Because I know whose side I'm on. I'm on the side of working people just like my sister. People who work harder and harder, but who worry about the cost of living. They're not asking for the world. They just want to do the best for their kids. They want their town centres, the places they care about, to thrive, their public services to work, and people in power to see their problems. And right now, they're worried sick. They turn on the TV, they see bombs falling. They go to the petrol station, see prices rising, and they think, how is this happening to us again? They say, how can I be paying the price for a war thousands of miles away that I don't support, that Britain isn't involved in? And it's not a new feeling, is it? For 2 decades, our country has been buffeted by crisis after crisis. The 2008 financial crash, the Tory austerity that followed it, Brexit, COVID, the Ukraine war, on and on it goes. And the response is always the same. A desperate attempt to get back to the status quo, a status quo that failed working people time and again. Our response this time must be different, a complete break. We must make this country stronger, take control of our economic security, our energy security, our defence security, and we must make this country fairer. Strength through fairness. That is my compass in this world. It is a core Labour argument. And in the coming days, you will see those values writ large in the King's speech. And you will see hope, urgency, and exactly whose side we're on reflected in everything we say and everything we do. So let me give you 3 examples today, starting with British Steel. Because what we did in Scunthorpe last year is one of the proudest things we have done in government. That plant was hours away from closure, and that is thousands of jobs gone, an entire region decimated, Britain's security exposed. And so we acted. Parliament was in recess, but it didn't matter. As a united Labour Party, we passed emergency legislation and we took control. And we must bring that same urgency to everything now, starting, appropriately enough, with Scunthorpe, because steel is the ultimate sovereign capability. Strong nations in a world like this need to make steel. That's why we're backing steel in Port Talbot and across the UK. But in Scunthorpe, we've been negotiating with the current owner, and a commercial sale has not been possible. And now a public interest test could be met. So I can announce that legislation will be brought forward this week to give the government powers, subject to that public interest test, to take full national ownership of British Steel. Public ownership in the public interest. Urgent government on the side of working people, making Britain stronger with the hope of industrial renewal. That is a Labour choice. Second example, Europe. And I'm sorry, but I need to take a bit of a detour on this, because I want to remind you what Nigel Farage said about Brexit. He said it would make us richer. Wrong. It made us poorer. He said it would reduce migration. Wrong. Migration went through the roof. He said it would make us more secure. Wrong again. It made us weaker. He took Britain for a ride, and unlike the Tories, actually, who at least had to face up to it, he just fled the scene. And now he'll talk about almost anything other than the consequences of the one policy he actually delivered. Because he's not just a grifter, he is a chancer. And so at the next EU summit, I will set a new direction for Britain. The last government was defined by breaking our relationship with Europe. This Labour government will be defined by rebuilding our relationship with Europe, by putting Britain at the heart of Europe, so that we are stronger on the economy, stronger on trade, stronger on defence, you name it. Because standing shoulder to shoulder with the countries that most share our interests, our values, and our enemies, that is the right choice for Britain. That is the Labour choice. And for our young people, also something more. Because Brexit snatched away their ability to work, to study, and to live easily in Europe. That's why I'm proud we restored the Erasmus scheme. But I want to go further. I want to make a better offer for our young people. Restore that hope, that freedom, that sense of possibility. And so I want an ambitious youth experience scheme to be at the heart of our new arrangement with the EU, so that our young people can work, can study, and live in Europe, a symbol of a stronger relationship and a fairer future with our closest allies. That is the Labour choice. And third, the greatest hope. The hope that every parent has of a better future for their children. And I want parents to feel that that is shared by their government. Now, my parent, don't worry, I'm not going there, but they didn't have a lot of money. And my mum was seriously ill for almost all of her life. But when they were in their later years, reflecting on what gave their life meaning, I could see that, as well as their hope in us, their kids, what comforted them was the idea that they had contributed to a Britain that was getting better for young people, that kids now had a better opportunity than they did. And so I have always been driven by the idea that every child should go as far as their talent or effort takes them. It's a beautiful idea, shared widely across this country. We tell ourselves stories about it, don't we? Stories, not unlike mine, about the working class kids who do make it. And I don't blame people for telling those stories. It's important to tell those stories. But it's not everyone, is it? So when I say every child should have the opportunity to go as far as their talent or effort takes them, I mean every child. I mean the kids who are growing up in poverty, the kids who have special educational needs, the kids who can't get a job, and the kids who are ignored, frankly, because society often only puts those who go to university on a pedestal. We don't really see anything else as success. And that is wrong, deeply wrong. So we will go much further on our investment in apprenticeships, in technical excellence colleges, in special educational needs. We will make sure that every young person struggling to find a job will get a guaranteed offer of a job, training or work placement. And we will go much further with our Pride in Place programme. Back the millions of people who give their time and their effort to young people in their community. We will back them, not just with money, but with power. And we will make sure that kids whose talent lies with their hands, kids who go to college, kids ignored by the status quo, because politicians' kids don't go there, they will finally get the respect that they deserve in a stronger, fairer Britain. That is the Labour choice. These are just a few examples, but they show the urgency and hope in our direction. They show the Labour values we will be guided for. And they show, frankly, the lessons that we will learn. Now, other parties will draw different lessons. In fact, they already are. They want more grievance politics, more division, more pointing at Britain's problems, looking not for solutions, but for someone to blame. Now, that's fine if it's me, if it's politicians, that's the job. But increasingly, it's not. It's other people in this country. And I don't think that's British. That is not the decency and respect that we are known for. But it's here. That politics is with us now. And you'll see it again on Saturday at a march designed to confront and intimidate this diversity and this diverse country. That is why this Labour government will block far-right agitators from travelling to Britain for that event, because we will not allow people to come to the UK to threaten our communities and spread hate on our streets. This is nothing less than a battle for the soul of our nation. And I want to be crystal clear about how we will win it. Because we cannot win as a weaker version of Reform or the Greens. We can only win as a stronger version of Labour, a mainstream party of power, not protest. And I also want to be really clear on this, because I will never stop fighting for the decent, respectful, diverse country that I love. I will never give up on the hope we can unlock in this country, the hope of renters for security in their home, of workers for fairness at work, of public services freed from austerity, the hope of European solidarity, of community pride, of the people who paint over the graffiti that is racist, a country taking control of its future, our spirit unchanged, our resolve unbroken, the hope of a country that can and will become a stronger, fairer Britain. That is the hope I'm fighting for. That is the hope we are fighting for. That is the Labour choice. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, he needed a speech to save his premiership. What is clear from that is Keir Starmer is not going anywhere unless he's forced out. Now, though, comes perhaps the most perilous part of this morning. We're expecting the Prime Minister to take questions from journalists, and how he answers these questions is going to be very, very closely watched by Labour MPs who may be waiting to move against him. Let's listen.
I'm now going to take some questions from the media, and I'm starting with Chris Mason. Chris.
Thank you. Chris Mason, BBC News. Prime Minister, do you think in your gut what you have said is enough this morning? And what do you say directly to those of your colleagues who are weighing up right now whether to back you or to suggest that you should go? And if I may, would you back continuing to block Andy Burnham from trying to return to Parliament?
Well, Chris, there's a lot packed into that question. Let me just... What I'm doing is setting out the response, the direction that we need to take, and the acknowledgement that in the world we live in now, we need a bigger response than 2024. It is a different world, and an acknowledgement that this isn't the first shock the country's been through with the Iran conflict. We've had plenty of those in the last 20 years, but every time the government of the day has tried to get back to a status quo that doesn't work. And we're not going to do that this time. That is the urgent task facing our country. We were elected into office to change this country, to bring about the change that is needed. The frustration that has been spoken about is a frustration of at least 20 years, if not more. That is what we're charged with changing. That is what we will change. In relation to Andy Burnham, obviously, any future decision is for the NEC. Andy's doing a great job as mayor in Manchester. And I actually work really well with Andy, and I'll give you two examples. On Northern Powerhouse Rail, which is really important for the North West. We are working together on that project. But equally, we've stood together to support Manchester, the community, when we had the terrible attack on a synagogue last year. Andy was the first person I phoned, and I went straight to Manchester to work with him on our response. So we work very well together, but the actual decision will be one for the NEC. Thank you, Chris, very much. Beth, from Sky News.
Thank you. Prime Minister, back in 2021, when Labour lost hundreds of council seats in the Hartlepool by-election, you thought about resigning as Labour leader, explaining, and this is quoting you, "I didn't feel I should be bigger than the party." But these results, this moment, is so much worse than then. You've lost nearly 1,500 councillors, 40 councils, you've lost Wales. Haven't you, for one moment, thought you should step aside in the interests of the party and country? And if you haven't, why haven't you? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Beth. I think what we witnessed with the last government was the chaos of constantly changing leaders. And it cost this country a huge amount. A huge amount. And I'll tell you who paid the price. It was working people. They paid the price of this. They are still paying the price of this. A Labour government will not inflict that on our country again. We were elected with a mandate to change this country because of what had gone before. And that is what we will do. Yes, I acknowledge the frustration. Yes, I acknowledge the results are tough. Yes, I acknowledge that we've lost brilliant representatives across the United Kingdom. And I have a responsibility for that. But I also have a responsibility to deliver the change that we were elected and that we promised this country. And I'll deliver on that. Thank you very much, Beth.
Vic said to you this weekend?
Vic is a rock, and we talk everything through together, as you know. Robert Peston from ITV.
Prime Minister, these were arguably the worst election results for Labour in 100 years. And, you know, I spent all weekend, as you'd expect, talking to your MPs and ministers, and, you know, most of them said to me that they do think your time is up. So what would persuade you that you're not the best person for this job? And just on this issue of this is no longer the time for incremental change, when you were elected, we'd had 15 years of no growth. We'd had Putin's war that led to the worst energy spike in history. Many would say Brexit had failed. Why didn't you get it then?
Well, Robert, look, I'm not going to shy away from the fact that I've got some doubters, including in my own party. And I'm not going to shy away from the fact that I have to prove them wrong, and I will. I had my doubters when I took on the Labour Party. I had my doubters who said we couldn't change this party and make it capable of winning an election. And I proved them wrong. And when we did that, I had my doubters who said, you can't lead us to a general election victory after the loss in 2019. It was so bad. It's not possible. And I proved them wrong. And I'm going to prove them wrong again here. I also feel a deep sense of personal responsibility to deliver on the mandate that we won at that 2024 election. The first Labour government for 14 years that had to come in and clear up the mess and build a better Britain. That is what I came into politics to do, and that is what I will deliver. Thank you very much. And Robert, the second, on the incremental. Look, you heard what I said about Scunthorpe. This is an example of the urgency and the pace and the type of decisions that we need to make. The same with Europe. A bigger response, a bigger argument that has been made before, because we're living in different times. The Iran war comes on top of all the other crises we've faced for 20 years. We have to learn the lesson. Every single time in the past, we've simply tried to get back as quickly as possible to a status quo that didn't work. We can't do the same again. That's why we need a bigger response. Thank you very much, Robert. I've got Catherine Foster from GB News. Catherine.
Thank you, Catherine Foster, GB News. Prime Minister, the Labour Party was founded to represent the working class, many of whom voted for Brexit because they felt left behind. You've said yourself that the status quo is not working, but you're standing here in London and you're promising more Europe. You lost so much of your core vote in the Red Wall, in Wales, in Scotland, because working class communities feel that the Labour Party has abandoned them and that you don't get it. Are they wrong?
Well, Catherine, thank you very much. On Brexit, the reason I reminded everyone what Nigel Farage said is because that was the promise he put to the country. That we'd be stronger, we'd be richer, we'd have lots of money for the NHS, immigration would come down, and it all proved to be false. And he doesn't take any responsibility. He's not going back to the country now saying it was a good thing, you've all benefited. He'll talk about almost anything else apart from the consequences of the one thing that he delivered for the country, Brexit. He doesn't want to talk about that, and there's a reason for that. It didn't help working people. It turned out what he said wasn't true. And that's why he doesn't want to talk about it now. But we have to talk about it now, because we have to address the situation we're in. We have to give this country a stronger economy, a stronger defence and security set of arrangements, given the world we are living in. And that's why I said what I've said about being closer to Europe, and this government being defined by bringing Europe back together again and Britain at the heart of Europe. Thank you very much, Catherine. I've got Pippa from The Guardian. Pippa.
Prime Minister, I've got a specific question for you and a wider one, if I may. The specific one is, if one of your MPs launches a contest, a leadership bid against you, will you fight it? And the wider one is, do you think that Britain is ungovernable? And if so, why? And who's to blame? The media, your MPs, the government, you? Thank you.
Yes and no. No, I'm not going to walk away in relation to the first part of your question for the reasons I've set out. And no, I don't think Britain is ungovernable. On the contrary, one of the things that I draw great strength from is all the millions of people who care passionately about their place, their community, where they live, where they work. The millions of people who give hours and hours and hours of their time for their community, volunteering, helping others, running teams, you name it. That is a great strength of our country. I draw strength from the fact that we are a reasonable, tolerant, decent country, a live and let live country, a diverse country. That is the real Britain. That's not an ungovernable Britain. That is the Britain that I will fight for, particularly in light of the opponents we now have politically, different to the opponents that we had before. That is the real Britain. That is the Britain I love. That's the Britain I'll fight for. Thank you, Pippa. Jim Pickard from the FT. Jim.
Jim Pickard, FT. Prime Minister, you say you don't want incremental change, and you say you want Britain to be at the heart of Europe. Are you ruling out, however, Labour manifesto at the next general election, including single market or custom union membership? Because without either of those things, our economy is very much not in the heart of Europe.
Yeah, well, Jim, what I want to do is take a big leap forward with the EU-UK summit this year and take us closer, both on trade, the economy, defence and security. And that will then be a platform on which we can build as we go forward. And as we do that, I strongly believe we've got to turn our back on the arguments of the past, not open old grievances, but look forward together to how we make this country stronger, how we make this country fairer. And so that's the approach that I will take. I've got Audrey from The Times. Audrey.
Good morning, Prime Minister. Aubrey Allegretti from The Times. To follow up on a previous question, you said that whether Andy Burnham comes back to Parliament is a matter for the NEC. Your business secretary said as much this morning, but he also said that it would be a distraction and that Labour shouldn't be fighting unnecessarily elections. Do you agree with him? Do you think Labour can afford to have 2 by-elections in Greater Manchester for the mayoralty and wherever Andy Burnham returns? And also, if I may, over the weekend, I think you gave an interview in which you suggested that you would like to be Prime Minister for a full 10 years. Some Labour MPs have been unhappy with those comments. Do you still stand by them?
Well, look, on Andy Burnham, my answer, Aubrey, is the same. That will be a matter for the National Executive Committee if and when the issue arises. But just to be really clear, on a personal level, I've worked very closely with Andy in our respective roles now. The first person I worked for when I came to Parliament was Andy. He wanted me in his team in the Shadow Home Office. I wanted to be in his team in the Shadow Home Office. So we work very well together. We'll continue to work very well together. If the issue arises, it'll be a matter for the NEC. On the decade, look, what I'm doing is spelling out the scale of the challenge that we face. It's the same argument I was making before the election, which is after the damage of the last government, it will take time to clear that damage up and to build the better, stronger country that we need. And that's the decade that I've been talking about. Look, do I recognise that we've got to turn this around? Yes, of course I do. Do I realise that we've got to respond to these elections in the way I've set out in the speech I gave a moment to? Yes, of course I do. And what I've done today is set out how I intend to address that task. Thank you very much, Aubrey. I've got Sophie from the Mirror.
Hi, Sophie Huskisson from the Mirror. Thank you, Prime Minister. So do you agree with Angela Rayner that this could be your last chance to change course and save the Labour Party's future? And do you think the party should move more to the left to become, as you put it, a stronger version of Labour? And if I can just ask as well, since the losses in Wales and Scotland, have you spoken to Eluned Morgan and Anas Sarwar and what was said? Thank you.
Let me take them in reverse order. I've spoken to both Eluned and Anas. I'm not going to go through the conversation, but I have spoken to them, as I've spoken to many of those brilliant representatives who didn't get elected this time, and to council leaders across the country. I've spent a good deal of the weekend having those calls, but those calls did include Eluned and Anas. In relation to the task of turning this around, look, I do understand the enormity of the task that we face. We inherited a terrible legacy from the last government. Economically, public services, the NHS on its knees. And what we found when we got into government was even worse than we feared. And one of the mistakes I think we made was we wanted to level with the country about how bad things were. But we didn't convince people enough in that early period of the change that we would bring about and why their lives would be better. And that's why we have to change that and inject much more hope and optimism into what we are saying. And so I think Angela and I agree, and I've spoken to Angela as well, by the way, so I know exactly what her thinking is in relation to this. Thank you very much. I've got Jack from The Sun.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Jack from The Sun, just on that point, when you did speak to Angela Rayner, did she rule out ever launching a leadership challenge against you? And also, you said in your speech just now that if you were ousted as Labour leader, it would plunge the country into chaos. Some of your critics say your government is already mired in chaos, but can you be clear about what you mean? Are you saying that because it is you with the mandate, if you were ousted, there would have to be a general election?
Well, Jack's a lot bound up with that. I did speak to Angela. I'm afraid I'm going to disappoint you by not going... I've spoken to Angela many, many times, by the way, in the last few weeks. We are friends, we get on very well. But I'm not going to go through each and everything that we discussed in those calls. But on this question of chaos, look, the question whether if a government constantly changes its leadership, the question whether that damages the country is not an academic question. It's not something that you study at university and go through various theories. We tested it. We tested it to destruction under the last government, and it inflicted huge damage on this country. A Labour government will never be forgiven if we repeat that and inflict that on the country. And that's what I mean when I say I'm not going to plunge this country into chaos. Jason from the Mail.
Thanks, PM. That was a heartfelt speech. Your own MPs, though, at the end of last week were saying that you were detested on the doorstep. Those are their words. They said that people are no longer listening to you and that it doesn't matter how many heartfelt speeches you make, your unpopularity is dragging this government down. In those circumstances, don't you owe it to them to step aside and give someone else a go at keeping these forces of darkness at bay?
Well, look, I acknowledged, Jason, a moment ago, there is frustration across the country that at the status quo, which isn't working. There's frustration that politics is not working for too many people. And yes, there is some frustration with me, I acknowledge that. But that frustration that I'm describing has been built up over many, many years by people who feel that their lives are not getting better, that their city centre, their town centre, the place where they live doesn't look any better for them, that their children aren't going to get better chances than they got. That is what's driving that frustration. That is deep, that is political, that is the challenge we have to rise to. I mean, it's not a frustration that can be just cast aside easily. It's deeply bound in the status quo that has failed for so many years, and that's why we have to turn that around. And I've got Bethan McGinley.
Hi.
Bethan.
Hi. So you talked a lot today about giving young people hope again, but for many young Britons, things like home ownership, secure work and financial stability still feel further away than it did for previous generations. Why should they believe that this government can reverse that?
Well, I think it's such a good question because I think young people have been very badly let down, whether that's on opportunities at work. We've got the best part of 1 million people, young people not in work. That's going to have a huge impact on them for the rest of their lives. People who can't get on the housing ladder very quickly or at all. And we have to instil the hope in them. We do that by changing what we're doing to help people get into work. We do that by taking better protections for renters. Too many young people are spending a lot of their income on rent, therefore they can't save their money to pay for a deposit. We're changing that with the Renters' Rights Act, which came into force just a week and a bit ago. And we're changing that with the hope of a better future and the sense in which they will be able to work, travel and study in Europe in a way which hasn't been possible in recent years. And in the end, those young people are our hope, because that's why I gave the example of my mum and dad, and it's a very real example because I think, you know, very many people when they get towards the end of their lives do reflect and say, you know, what was my life about? And for my mum and dad, in material things, they didn't actually have a lot to show for their lives, but they had this deep comfort. I could really feel it, this deep comfort inside, that they, my mum and dad, Rod and Joe, that they had contributed to a country where the next generation would have better chances. That is the real hope and optimism in young people, and that's where it resides with me, because I think, as I said in the speech, that's the greatest hope of all. So thank you very much for that question. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Keir Starmer there giving a speech that could define the rest of his premiership. It was pretty clear from what he said there that he's not going anywhere unless he's forced out. He said, I take full responsibility for not walking away. He went on to say that he was going to try and make sure that he leads the change that the country needed. If we don't get this right, our country will go down a very dark path. I know I have my doubters. I know I have to prove them wrong, and I will. And I guess what he does have to prove to his own MPs is that he is someone who can win for them, again, in places like Wigan and Sunderland, in London. And to do that, he needs to prove he can be more radical as well, something that will, I think, take time to get some of those policies in place. But does he have the time? And the coming hours and days matter an awful lot. Let's get some analysis, shall we? We're joined by our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates. You were saying before that the speech mattered, but also the Q&A mattered too. What did you make of what happened?
Well, let's look at the job he tried to do in the speech. And there's a strategy that's evident. He is making it sound more risky to change Prime Minister. A lot of that speech was quite dark and pessimistic in tone. He talked about dangerous times and dangerous opponents and the dark path. And in that light, what he was saying was that there is a deep folly of changing Prime Minister because it causes chaos, raises costs, increases insecurity just at the point where the nation needs a steady hand. His appeal to his party and his appeal to the country is that it is riskier to change than to stay. And that was the job, I think, of the speech. And it was that message that went through the heart of it and was the most important thing of all. There were some developments. We had some policy announcements. The government is now, looks like it's close to resolving the question of what to do with British Steel in Scunthorpe. It's now minded and wants to nationalise it. That will bring onto the books a cost of, it's a lot of money. It's losing £1 million a day. It was sort of, the government took control of it. It was a bit unsatisfactory. There's now a direction for that. He was wrapping it up in ideology, though. He was saying Labour values means nationalisation. That's a shift. That's not the way that he's approached things like that in the past. There was also a passage on Europe where he suggested that we could get closer to Europe. He fudged but didn't rule out whether at the time of the next election that could mean rejoining the single market, rejoining the customs union, rejoining the European Union as a whole. He sort of slightly annoyingly said he didn't want to rerun arguments of the past. There are some in government that don't think the speech meant any of that. But there was another bit in the question and answer. He was asked about the return of Andy Burnham, and he gave a very, very striking answer. And I think in the sort of machinations of today, it's that might be the most important bit. To the question, could Andy Burnham come back? He said, this time, that's a matter for Labour's ruling body, the National Executive. Why does that matter? Because last time, his answer was a straight no, and he led from the front to block Andy Burnham in the National Executive, which he's a member of, and he turned up personally on the Sunday morning to say, don't do it, stay as Manchester Metro Mayor. And I think that just gives a little bit of room, a little bit of wiggle room for those who want to get rid of Keir Starmer but want to wait to have the contest until Andy Burnham's back in. Keir Starmer's almost giving a wink and a nod. Maybe that's a possibility.
Yes, and it's important to really kind of emphasise, I think, what a flashpoint this has become, whether or not Andy Burnham is let back in. You talk to Labour MPs and they say if Andy Burnham was in Westminster now, there would be a leadership challenge, right? Which I think shows why Keir Starmer did try and block him in the first place, even though he says it was nothing to do with me, Gov. But also, of course, why there is this groundswell from people on the left as well. He was saying effectively, though, that he was going to run in a leadership contest. He didn't say it explicitly, but he said, I'm not going to walk away.
I think the message is, right now, I'm running. How do you square that, though, with it? Keir Starmer has a manner of delivering speeches and taking questions where you're never completely sure at the end of the process where you're left by the series of mildly conflicting statements. So yes, I will meet any challenge, but at the same time, I'm relaxed about Andy Burnham coming back was sort of the hint. So where does that leave us in 6 months' time? Because I think a return to Parliament of Andy Burnham would end up being a direct threat. There was as ever, a sort of mushy middle that he managed to land on. But, as we always say, it is Labour MPs who are judge, jury and executioner of the moment. Our verdict is just a piece of analysis. Their verdict is the one that matters to the future of the PM.
Normally we always say that you guys listening are the ones that are most important when it comes to speeches. Sorry, but that's actually not the case today. No offence. It was a speech to Labour MPs, right? It was saying, just don't do anything yet. Give me a chance. Let me prove myself. Let me enact some radical policies. And then we'll see where we are.
Oh, God, it felt like he was launching a sort of leadership campaign. It had that...
just bizarre.
It had that vibe about it. It was much closer to what you'd see, the type of address that you'd see when he addresses Labour conference, the personal values bit, the sort of here's my family section. One person who was engaged with this, the speech over the weekend called it a sort of wish list of stuff from 2 years ago that he should have said and enacted then. And there is a sort of, in any reset, there's an attempt to redo stuff that you didn't do well enough first time around. And there was there was a middle section that I felt I'd broadly heard before about him personally and his motivations and where he sits, all of which doesn't really answer the question where there are hard choices to make, where he'd go down. A bit of light, but not a huge amount, but some passion and a fair bit of I'm going nowhere for now.
Sam, thank you very much indeed. There you have it. I think there are two really key things to take away. Two things that the Prime Minister didn't do. Firstly, he did not say explicitly that he was going to welcome Andy Burnham back, that he wouldn't be blocked from running. He just said it was a matter for the NEC. Secondly, he did not set out a timetable for when he was going to go. It was the opposite, right? He said that he wants to continue to fight. We don't know what's going to unfold in the coming months, days, or anything like that. I can see Sam wants to make a point to you.
Yes, in just the last few seconds.
20 seconds.
We've had another Labour MP calling for Keir Starmer to go. The moment the speech finished, David Smith said it is now time for the Prime Minister to set out a clear timetable. We've had 3 years not just to convince the British public that we have the answers, we have 3 years to avoid disaster of populism.
Well, I don't need to tell you that was not the response the Prime Minister was hoping for. More coming up.